breaking news. Polls closing on another major primary election night. Voters in 7 states in the U.S. casting ballots. We've got runoffs and primaries this evening. Among those on the ballot, a convicted felon, a former U.S. presidential nominee, a former anchor at CNBC, and a former head of the NAACP. Just to name a few, it is a big night, and Jason Carroll is out front.
I've already predicted your future. In fact, I'm going to define it when you get beat.
In New York, former U.S. Congressman Michael Grimm is fighting to get his old job back. He resigned in 2015 and was sent to federal prison after being convicted of tax evasion.
That's off topic.
In 2014, Grimm also infamously threatened a reporter, questioning his campaign finances.
You have to do that to me again in 3 years.
Grimm has strong support in his Brooklyn and Staten Island district for his work after Superstorm Sandy.
One of the main reasons why I'm running for Congress is to forward President Trump's agenda and the pro-American agenda.
Despite Grimm's support of the president, it's his opponent, current Representative Dan Donovan, who got Trump's endorsement.
The president told the people of the 11th Congressional District, don't vote for him.
Trump tweeted in May, "There is no one better to represent the people of New York and Staten Island, a place I know very well, than Representative Dan Donovan, who is strong on borders and crime, loves our military and our vets, voted for tax cuts, and is helping me to make America great again." Despite that tweet, Donovan was one of 12 GOP House members who voted against the GOP tax plan. Meanwhile, in Utah, Mitt Romney is vying for his own political comeback, this time in the U.S. Senate.
I did not expect to do this after I lost to Barack Obama. Did you know I lost?
The former Republican presidential nominee harshly criticized Trump during the 2016 campaign.
Here's what I know. Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud.
But was considered for Trump's Secretary of State.
I'll stand with President Trump if the policies he's proposing are good for the state of Utah, for other states, for the nation. On the other hand, if he were to say something that is divisive and significant, then I feel a moral responsibility to speak out.
Despite walking this fine line, Romney earned Trump's endorsement. He will make a great senator and worthy successor to Orrin Hatch and has my full support and endorsement, Trump tweeted in February. And in Maryland, Ben Jealous is vying for governor. The former NAACP president and tech investor is in a crowded Democratic primary. One top target, the president.
As governor, I'll confront Trump when he attacks our values.
Also in Maryland, veteran Democratic Senator Ben Cardin is facing a long-shot challenge from someone new to politics.
We need to actually take the reins of power from them.
Chelsea Manning. In 2013, Manning was convicted of stealing and disseminating 750,000 pages of documents and videos to WikiLeaks. President Obama commuted the sentence in January of last year.
So, Jason, I mean, when you go through all those, it's pretty incredible how many people and fascinating races you have. Michael Grimm, obviously, after being convicted of a felony, serving time in prison. How is he feeling about his chances tonight?
Well, look, they're trying to put all that behind them. I got off the phone just a short while ago with the campaign spokesperson. And look, they feel as though the momentum is behind them. They feel as though the Trump enthusiasm is behind them. The polls are shifting in their favor as well, they say. So they feel like this comeback is coming, Aaron. And he says when the polls close in just about an hour from now, you're going to see proof of that. Aaron.
Well, it's a big and important night across this country. And Jason Carroll, thank you so very much. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Stay with CNN as the results come in. Anderson's next.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with breaking news. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders is expected to receive Secret Service as soon as tomorrow. This comes after she was asked to leave a Virginia restaurant because of her role with the Trump administration. That's obviously sparked a national conversation on civility in the Trump era. And keeping them honest tonight, President Trump is now trying to leverage political advantage over the political discourse that's been boiling over in recent days. Discourse that, of course, he himself is a big part of. Now, this evening, his campaign sent out this fundraising email to supporters. It mentions how Sarah Sanders was asked to leave the restaurant. It also mentions the moment caught on tape when Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was heckled in a Washington restaurant last week.
Shame! 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 Family separation! And family separation! And family separation!
Secretary Nielsen ended up leaving the restaurant. The fundraising email also mentions Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's come under fire for encouraging people to publicly shame members of the Trump team wherever they see them. Here's what she said at a rally on Saturday.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
In the fundraising email requesting donations, the president states, and I quote, "The left is trying to bully and buy their way back into power, not on my watch." And later it says, "We will not be intimidated by their vicious bullying." Now, this is clearly an issue the White House wants to keep front and center. Just yesterday, Press Secretary Sanders began her briefing discussing her experience in the restaurant, which, according to a White House official to CNN, is something the president instructed her to do. She also made a call for civility.
Healthy debate on ideas and political philosophy is important, but the calls for harassment and push for any Trump supporter to avoid the public is unacceptable. America is a great country, and our ability to find solutions despite those disagreements is what makes us unique.
Now, Sarah Sanders' point is obviously well taken. We should be able to have disagreements with fellow citizens without resulting to harassment and bullying. But it should also be noted that the president has taken uncivil discourse to a whole new level, and Sarah Sanders has never distanced herself from things the president has said.
Crooked Hillary Clinton. Little Marco, lying Ted Cruz, lying Ted. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
Well, Rosie O'Donnell's disgusting. I mean, both inside and out. You take a look at her, she's a slob.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you. Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago. Jeb Bush is a low-energy person. For him to get things done is hard. Maxine Waters, a very low IQ individual. We have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas.
Well, just yesterday, 28 minutes after Sarah Sanders spoke about the need for civility at 3:54 p.m. yesterday, the president was back to lobbying insults, writing in a tweet asking, quote, "Why is Senator Mark Warner, perhaps in a near-drunken state, claiming he has information that only he and Bob Mueller, the leader of the 13 angry Democrats on a witch hunt, knows? Isn't this highly illegal? Is it being investigated?" The president was referring to a Politico report about the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Mark Warner told Politico he had made a bad joke about how alcohol would help him spill secrets about the Mueller probe. Now, the presidential insults didn't stop there. About 4 hours after Sarah Sanders called for civility, President Trump took aim at everyone from reporters to late-night talk show hosts at a rally in South Carolina. Take a look.
Now, you know, we have a lot of fake news back there, these fakers. I said, I don't care. I can't stand that guy. She blamed everybody for losing the election except for one person, herself. There's David Lynch. Enjoy it because his career in Hollywood is officially over. The guy on CBS is what a lowlife. But there's no talent. They're not like talented people. This guy on CBS has no talent. Jimmy Kimmel would meet me before the election. I don't even think you'd deny it. No talent. Now I wouldn't do a show. The guy's terrible. Jimmy Fallon calls me up. He looks like a lost soul. I said, Jimmy, be a man.
Well, it's easy to demand civility from one's opponents, not so easy to demand yourself. Let's get the latest now from CNN's Jim Acosta, who joins us at the White House. Jim, I mean, this fundraising effort, it's totally playing right into the president's hands.
It certainly is. It is going back to what I heard from a White House source who said that, listen, the White House over here, they want to put out this message that there is intolerance on the left, never mind the fact that the president, including members of his administration, have been pretty intolerant of other people's views. They've bullied people at times. But just to give you a sense of what's in this fundraising email, it talks about how Sarah Huckabee Sanders was kicked out of a restaurant. Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Secretary, was jeered as she tried to leave a restaurant. This is from the Trump campaign trying to raise money for the president's 2020 re-election campaign. They're obviously making it very clear that they see what they believe to be harassment from the left as being a potent issue heading into the fall midterms and beyond.
I mean, it is interesting, you know, I mean, you were at the president's rally last night where he lobbed insults at everyone from Jimmy Fallon to the Prime Minister of Canada. I know you were actually on the receiving end of a good deal of incivility from those who attended the rally, which, you know, was always encouraged by the president, often during speeches.
That's right, and there were some glaring headlines from the president's remarks going after Jimmy Fallon, as you said, and talking about a whole host of different topics. One thing that we didn't really focus on is he once again referred to us as fake news and the enemy of the people. He once again referred to the press as the enemy of the people. Anderson, I've seen this at countless Trump rallies where he just whips people up into a frenzy, and so it was no surprise to me when I walked into that rally yesterday evening, hours before the president took the stage, that there were people coming up to me, elderly women coming up to me and taunting us and saying all sorts of terrible things. But Anderson, one thing I did find throughout the evening is that there were people who would come up to us and say, listen, I'm sorry about what's happening to you. And one man actually at one point asked if anybody would lend him a chair. I gave him his chair. This chair, and he came back with his mother and said, thank you for helping us out. My mother really appreciates it. And so, Anderson, I think what happens often is that when people see us as who we are, human beings, they sort of lower the hostility level. But no question about it, I think when it comes to civility in this country, it starts at the top. The president has to set the right example for the rest of the country.
Jim, thanks very much.
You bet.
A lot to discuss with legendary journalist Dan Rather, host of Access TV's The Big Interview, also political consultant, legendary political consultant, Stuart Stevens. Stuart, thanks for being with us, and Dan as well. Dan, you wrote on Facebook today, President Trump and the GOP bemoaning a lack of civility is a hypocritical farce. It spurs an almost uncontrollable bout of forehead slapping in disbelief. Can you just explain what you mean?
Well, I think what you showed at the top of the show would be the best explanation. Here is a president who has specialized as part of his success, bullying. Look, incivility takes many forms. And to make any comparison between what is happening, say, in an obscure restaurant somewhere, with the kind of, I hate to say it, but lies, corruption, immoral acts like ripping children from their mothers, and to equate that with something that happened at a restaurant, it's a hypocritical farce. That, look, let's stop for a moment and put this in perspective. Who lit the fires of hate and incivility that we're now seeing going up everywhere? It began with the Donald Trump's campaign. It began with his presidency. It's an indisputable fact. I know there are going to be people who say, well, it's biased to say that, but the facts support that. In word and deed, he has not put a tone of civility on the presidency. Now, those in power, those of the power of the state, those of the power of the presidency, should be held to a higher, much higher standard than everybody else to set an example.
Stuart, though, is it right, though, or is the rational response to incivility from a leader incivility on the other side?
Well, the problem with civility and incivility is that it starts and it's hard to stop. I mean, bad gets worse pretty quickly. And I think it's very much, if you think of a sports team, if you go to a game, a hockey game, and everybody's fighting, the crowd gets more into it. Civility has to start with those on the field, and in politics, it's those in office. And I agree with Dan. I think that the president, when he ran for office, set a new low in incivility. I mean, he accused, cabinet member of being a child molester. He accused Ted Cruz of being involved in the Kennedy assassination, attacked Senator Cruz's wife. And I think once you start there, it's just, where do you go? And there has to be sort of a stoplight with civility. And I think that political leaders have to be there to say that. And if people just start ignoring stoplights, you end up like Rio. Traffic, it just goes everywhere. And it has to be self-imposing. And it's a very difficult thing to make rules about. You just have to sort of feel it and know it. And I think there's a lot of people involved in politics that really don't like what's happening now, that wince when they see this stuff.
But they're not speaking up, really. I mean, unless the ones who are leaving office on the Republican side speak up, but you don't hear a lot of other voices.
No, well, it's worth remarking, I think, Anderson, that it's an ancient playbook of autocrats and authoritarian leaders to deliberately try to provoke an emotional response from people. And you're seeing some of that now. The Maxine Waters thing, in my personal opinion, was a tactical, if not a strategic mistake on her part, because it was just the kind of reaction to Trump's acts that he wanted.
Right. Yeah, in fact, I mean, they're fundraising off it tonight, so clearly it's an issue that the president feels, and he encouraged Sarah Sanders to start off, from what we're told by White House officials, to start off the briefing with her talking about her personal experience with the restaurant, which is an extraordinary thing when you think about it. That's That's what's being discussed at a White House briefing.
I think you're exactly right. It's a diminishing of the office, I think. I mean, I think what happened to Sarah Sanders is very unfortunate. But if you're Press Secretary of the United States, President of the United States, off your official account, you can talk about anything. You can talk about hunger. You can talk about Iraq war. You can talk about threat of nuclear Iran. And to talk about what happened to you at a restaurant, I think it just diminishes it. And it's sort of this victim shopping. Now, Republicans used to be against this. It used to be the party of personal responsibility. Used to say that we had to go out and look for trivial things to become victimized, made it diminish those who truly were victims. And I think we were right then, and I think we're wrong now to get out there and say, who can offend me the most? You end up like some sort of awful soccer team where everybody's flopping around instead of just playing the game.
Well, the thing is, I'm sorry, Pat, but it's always important to see things from 30,000 feet, to use the cliche, or as we say in television, to take the wide shot. This is not so much about policy, President Trump's policy. It's about the heart and soul and character of the country. It's about who are we now? What have we become? What are we becoming with these outbursts of incivility, led the tone set by the President of the United States himself?
I mean, in terms of other administrations you've covered, I mean, you obviously famously covered the Nixon administration. I mean, where are we on the scale of incivility? I mean, is it?
Well, we're off the charts. I don't think there's any precedent for this with an American president setting this kind of tone of incivility. Perhaps back in the 1880s, during that period, there were some very rough things said. But listen,
even in the 70s, you had radical groups who were, planting bombs in buildings and stuff. So I mean, that's
outright violence. Right. That's incivility taken to an extreme. But in terms of the presidency, I think this is unprecedented. What's going on?
More so than Nixon.
Much so than Nixon. For example, with President Nixon, for all of the illegal, unconstitutional things he did, President Nixon did have a belief in the Constitution, in the system of checks and balances represented by the institutions. Now, he regularly tried to, in secret, undercut those, but publicly, he supported them. That's not the case with President Trump. And that's a very, very big difference. But I come back to, we have to see ourselves and what we're becoming. Where does this go now? Does it get worse or not? And that depends less on the president, because he's not going to change. He's going to continue doing this. He thinks his playbook is succeeding politically. It depends on each individual just to do the right thing. Be civil.
General Michael Hayden has been on the show, and he and I talked about the thin, what he calls the thin veneer of civilization. He uses the example of Sarajevo, multicultural city. You spent time there during the war that fell apart. Do you worry about where this is heading for us?
Sure. I think you see it in schools where you have kids that are getting bullied more. You have it just in sort of public dialogue. I mean, you often have this sense with Donald Trump that you're listening to the Nixon tapes, the sort of private side, but it's public. There's not a filter there. And there's something about that that's sort of mesmerizing to see. Like, what is he going to say next? And what is he going to do? But I think that the role of the president has to be to set a higher standard. It has to be something you aspire to. I mean, historically, it's always been. Now, a lot of time in their private life, they didn't hold up to that. Certainly true, like in the Kennedy administration. But you still, I think it's important to have role models. I am very old-fashioned about that. And to think that the presidency stands for aspirationally what is the best of us. And it's really unfortunate.
There's also something about the repetition that the president does very effectively, which after a time, it just normalizes everything. Like it's sort of, okay, yeah, a witch hunt, yeah, Lion Ted or Lion, Crooked Hill or whatever it is.
That's a really important point, because we all know you should be careful what you get used to, because you can get used to anything. And if we get accustomed to this and just shrug our shoulders and say, well, this is Trump, this. You've got to be very careful what we get used to. And my fear with this going on for as long as it has, and descending deeper and deeper into incivility, that as a country, as a people, as a society, we get used to it and just accept it.
Think how difficult it must be for a teacher to tell a 17-year-old not to do something that the president's doing.
Yeah. Stuart Stevens, Dan Rather, good to talk to you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Up next, a victory for the president. The Supreme Court upholds his travel ban. It's not the version he said from the beginning that he wanted. Keeping him honest on that ahead. And later, of the more than 2,000 children separated from their parents at the border, today we learned only 6 have been reunited with their families since last Wednesday, or there's only 6 fewer in custody, I should say, since last Wednesday. Details on that ahead. Tonight, we're keeping him honest with a court victory for the president and a reminder of his goal from the beginning for, quote, total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. Today, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 along partisan lines to uphold the travel ban, or at least the third version of the travel ban, which the president himself once dismissed as a watered-down and politically correct version. Watered down, that is, from the initial goal that he made crystal clear before he was elected when he said that, quote, in December 7th, 2015, that I just referenced.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. We have no choice. We have no choice.
Well, confusion was a hallmark of the travel ban from that point forward, with him later saying it was just a suggestion. And then after he was elected, he signed an executive order banning entry for 90 days for citizens from 7 Muslim-majority countries and indefinitely stopping refugees from Syria. Now, that was met with protests at airports in the United States, and the court battle started with judges in New York and Massachusetts temporarily blocking parts of the order. When Acting Attorney General Sally Yates didn't defend the travel ban, the president fired her. 2 months later, there was a revised travel ban, which also was blocked. In the federal court decisions, there were references to statements that the president and his advisors made, including that initial promise for a complete and total shutdown, and something else he said on this program back in March of 2016.
I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it. There is an unbelievable hatred of us.
In Islam itself?
You're going to have to figure that out, okay? You'll get another Pulitzer, right? But you're going to have to figure that out. But there is a tremendous hatred, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to be very careful, and we can't allow people coming into this country who have this hatred of the United States.
I guess the question is,
and of people that are not Muslim.
I guess the question is there a war between the West and radical Islam, or is there a war between the West and Islam
itself? It's radical, but it's very hard to define. It's very hard to separate because you don't know who's who.
Then candidate Donald Trump saying that Islam hates us with what he called an unbelievable hatred. Now, the version of the travel ban the Supreme Court upheld today is not a ban on all Muslims, as the president initially said he wanted. It restricts to varying degrees entry from 5 Muslim-majority countries: Iran, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and Somalia, as well as 2 non-Muslim-majority countries, North Korea and Venezuela. Its point and its efficacy are not to make America safer. Those are issues that can and will be debated. Its success in the Supreme Court is largely due to Justice Department attorneys vetting and cleaning up what you just heard the president say he hoped to do from the start to ban Muslims. Joining me in Senator is Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, a member of the Judiciary Committee. So, Senator, I know you opposed the Supreme Court ruling. This clearly was a legal and political victory for the president. There's no denying that. You would agree.
It was a victory for the president, but not for America. And I say with sadness, as a former law clerk to the United States Supreme Court, Justice Harry Blackmun, as a litigator and law enforcer who's argued cases before the Supreme Court, I have great reverence and respect for the court as an institution, but today it essentially abandoned its constitutional responsibility to look at that animus, that improper motivation that was so obvious in those statements that you just very dramatically played. And the abandonment of that responsibility may seem like a victory for Donald Trump, but it's really a grave injustice and defeat for America.
But the policy itself is different than what the president initially intended, and those Supreme Court justices who supported it believed it was correct under the wide powers of the presidency to keep this country safe. those who opposed it and dissented from the majority viewpoint seemed to focus on the president's prior remarks as a civilian, as a candidate.
And very important, Anderson, he has never disavowed those past statements. He has never said that they were wrong or that he wanted to abandon them. And number two, it took him 3 tries to get it right. There were 3 iterations of this so-called ban, and the Supreme Court chose to look only at the last one. There was a lot of hand-wringing and disapproving, head-shaking, but think of it this way. If an employer said, women are bad workers, and I'm going to fire bad workers who are women, and then he fired 5 women, not all the women who worked for him, and maybe he fired a man too, it would not be okay, no matter what he said afterward. The president here has not included all Muslims in the ban, and he's included North Korea, which is not a Muslim nation, but the animus and the motivation are clearly there, and that's what the Supreme Court should have paid attention to.
Yeah, Venezuela as well. You called on Congress to act to reverse this. You said, quote, we will legislate this ban out of existence. How would that even work exactly, considering this was a Supreme Court ruling and obviously Democrats are not in the majority?
Great question, Anderson, and unfortunately, we are not in the majority. The chances of legislation are slim. We have introduced legislation that would cut funding, in effect eliminate funding for this Muslim ban, but the chances of it passing are very remote. So the answer very simply is we need to change the composition of the Congress and legislate in a way that prevents this kind of discriminatory ban, reduces the discretion that the Supreme Court emphasized. It deferred to him on national security grounds, basically said, we don't like his statements, they contradict the meaning and values of the Constitution, but he has very broad discretion. That's what needs to be limited.
Senator, stay with us. I want to bring in our CNN chief legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, who's here with me as well. Jeff, I mean, first of all, how do you see the ruling by the Supreme Court today?
Well, it was the majority looked at this as a case about the presidency, about the power of all presidents, and they treated this executive order as if it was something of an immaculate conception, that it just sort of appeared out of nowhere. And if you look at the executive order itself, it doesn't say anything about Muslims. It doesn't say anything about, you know, the president's prior statements. It only refers to these 7 countries, 5 Muslim majority, 2 not. And the Supreme Court said, in light of that, it's perfectly permissible. The dissenters, the 4 dissenters led by Sonia Sotomayor, said, who are you kidding? This is just the Muslim ban in a tutu. This is a different way of prohibiting basically Muslims from getting into the United States, and drew on many of the comments that you did earlier. You know, this is why it matters who's on the Supreme Court and who appoints people on the Supreme Court, because the 4 Democratic majority, the 4 Democrats in the minority saw it one way and the 5 Republicans in the majority saw it the other way.
Senator Blumenthal, I mean, you say this is a Muslim ban or is reflective of the president's desire to ban all Muslims. I mean, there are many Muslim majority countries that are not part of this travel ban, Pakistan, Indonesia. There's a lot of Muslims in India. There are 2 non-Muslim majority countries in this ruling, North Korea and Venezuela. Not a lot of North Koreans trying to get into the United States, obviously. But is to you the inclusion of North Korea and Venezuela, is that a fig leaf?
It is a fig leaf. It is a disguise, a masquerade, done for the purpose of making it seem religiously neutral, when in fact it is clearly aimed at Muslims. And it is as if someone firing people from his company because they are women or Jews or Christians included someone from another religion just as a masquerade for firing the others whom he explicitly said were fired for that reason. And the irony here is that this decision comes down on a day when the court overruled Korematsu. As Justice Sotomayor said so eloquently, the court today replaces one grave mistake with another. I think we will
That was a Supreme Court
it.
ruling permitting the internment of Japanese, of American citizens of Japanese descent during World War II.
Exactly right. And it was dressed up, whether you call it a tutu or a masquerade, in the same way that this decision was. The decision affirming Korematsu way back when, under Franklin Roosevelt. And by the way, Donald Trump, in one of the quotes that you didn't cite here, actually compares the ban to what the court and President Roosevelt did at the time of Korematsu, and says that makes it okay.
And you know, if we can just put this in some political perspective, the reason why this was a victory for Donald Trump was because Mitch McConnell, on February 13th, 2016, the day that Justice Scalia died, when Barack Obama had 11 months left in his presidency, said there will be no vote on a nominee. And he kept that promise, and Merrick Garland was nominated, and he sat there for 11 months without being even a hearing, much less a vote. And that seat went to Neil Gorsuch, who has voted down the line, not just with Samuel Alito, but with Clarence Thomas, the most conservative member of the Supreme Court. And that's why Donald Trump won this lawsuit, and he won another suit about abortion rights today. That is ultimately the reason this case came out the way it did.
Jeff Toobin, Senator Blumenthal, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Coming up, much more on what Jeff just mentioned. The tweet from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's campaign today, a tweet with only a photo and no words, sums up a great deal about Republican reaction to today's Supreme Court ruling. The president called today's Supreme Court ruling on the latest version of his travel ban a tremendous victory. It certainly was a victory for the president and also for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who blocked a vote on President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, as Jeff Toobin just mentioned. Merrick Garland, of course, was his name, nominated in 2016 after Justice Scalia died, but Republicans refused to hold a hearing or to vote on him. And that led to a new president and a new nominee, Neil Gorsuch, who voted with the conservative majority today. After the ruling came down, McConnell's official campaign account on Twitter, Team Mitch, posted this photo of McConnell and Gorsuch shaking hands. Joining me now is CNN political commentator and former RNC Chief of Staff Mike Shields, and CNN political commentator, attorney, and former South Carolina State House member Bakari Sellers. Mike, I mean, the president certainly got a big victory today with this court ruling. I mean, there's been this near constant drumbeat, attacks and complaints that Democrats in Congress are nothing but obstructionists. There is some irony here, though, that the only reason President Trump was able to appoint Gorsuch is because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell obstructed.
Well, President Obama was fond of saying elections have consequences when he would do things that Republicans didn't like. But what's interesting about that is that he sort of ignored that elections have consequences in the midterms, too, because the 2014 midterms elected a Republican majority to the Senate.
That's true.
And they blocked him. And the Democrats could do the exact same thing if the things were reversed and put onto the ballot for the 2016 election who's going to get to appoint this seat. And the Democrats lost. Hillary Clinton was talking about the Supreme Court through the election, and so was Donald Trump. So it was on the ballot.
Right.
And the American people, by the way, support what the Supreme Court did today by about 60 to 65%. Now, I will say, the American people do not support religious tests for people entering the country, and so a Muslim ban is not what this is, and they wouldn't support that. Polling shows we actually have a tradition of religious liberty, but they do support not allowing people into the country when we can't verify from their country of origin whether or not they are secure, whether or not we know that we can trust that they're coming here because we've been able to talk to their government and know whether or not they're good or bad actors or not. And the American people support that. The Supreme Court upheld that today. It's a popular position, and the Supreme Court is made up the way that it is because Donald Trump won the election, and elections have consequences.
And Bakari, I mean, you can't say that anything McConnell did here was breaking any rules. And also, to Mike's point, I mean, this was front and center in this campaign, the battle for the Supreme Court, and many conservatives publicly who maybe didn't even really, had some qualms with Donald Trump as a candidate were voting for him because of the Supreme Court.
Well, first of all, let's just be clear. What Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans did to Barack Obama had not been done in over 100 years to any sitting president. So let's be clear about that. That's a Smithsonian fact. Also, I just want to point out that Democrats, we did not do a good job twofold. The first was in 2014 and, of course, 2010, but specifically 2014, getting our voters to the polls and giving Barack Obama a Senate he could work with. I blame that on us. I blame that on messaging. I blame that on Democrats not showing up to vote. The second thing is, in 2016, we didn't make this issue of the courts sexy enough. I've had this conversation with Jeffrey Toobin often. Democrats have to do a better job of explaining what it means for a president to be able to come in and elect a generation of federal judges and Supreme Court justices. Not only has this court, led by a stolen seat from Merrick Garland, not only has this court reinforced the Muslim ban today, but they struck down California abortion rights. They backed gerrymandered maps. They supported the Masterpiece Bakery case. I mean, we go down the list of things that this court has done. It's eroding our Constitution further and further, but Democrats have to do a better job of coming up and showing out at the voting booth. Until we do that, we really just can't complain.
Mike, you heard Senator Blumenthal before saying that essentially including North Korea and Venezuela is kind of a fig leaf, that this really is a Muslim ban. You just heard Bakari saying that as well. To that, you say what?
Well, I want to set an example of civility and politely disagree with Bakari on this. Muslims travel in and out of the United States every single day from countries all over the world freely and openly. And so there is no ban on a religion. There is a ban on countries that we can't verify whether or not the people coming in and out of the country are safe. And one of the things that sort of amuses me about this from the left is I don't see them saying, you know what, we would actually, why don't we have open it up just for California and we'll let everyone from these countries that we can't verify, let's move them into Beverly Hills next to our fancy houses where they can live next to us, even though we have no idea whether or not those people are safe or not. And so, unfortunately, the way the world is made up is that there are Islamic terrorists in countries that want to do the United States harm. That is not something that we created. That is just a fact. And we block those every day. Someone will say, well, we haven't been attacked by anybody from a foreign country. Right, because we are arming our armed forces and our intelligence communities with things like this to help them stop attacks, which happen every day and don't make the news. And so, look, I'm not for a Muslim ban. I don't think there should ever be a religious test on someone coming in and out of the country. There isn't a Muslim ban. Muslims come in every day. But there is a ban on countries where we can't verify their citizens.
Bakari, what about that? I mean, Pakistan is not on this. Indonesia is not on this. What about Mike's point?
Well, no, it's a ban on majority Muslim countries. I mean, Mike is really not making a point here. I think that if it's very clear when you look at the countries listed, there are a few things they have in common. They're majority Muslim, and they actually don't do any business with Donald Trump.
No, but he's saying what the commonality is that they don't do a good job. It's not easy in Somalia to figure out, you know, the background of people to really vet people.
Well, why isn't Saudi Arabia on the list? I mean, you can go. The majority of 9/11 hackers were from Saudi. I mean, attackers were from Saudi Arabia. I mean, you can go down the list and ask questions about each specific country. But the reason that we know this is a Muslim ban, and the reason that people are very disappointed in the court's decision, goes to the heart of Justice Sotomayor's dissent in this ruling, because we use the president's own words. We use his religious animus, and that should have been the center point of striking this down based on the establishment clause in the First Amendment that no law should favor or disfavor a religion.
All right, Bakari Sellers, Mike Shields, I appreciate it. Thanks very much. The administration says they would reunite the more than 2,000 children with their parents separated at the border. We've been asking for details, so today government officials held a conference call. Things didn't go so well. Details on that ahead.
CNN special report, Casey Anthony and the Summer of Lies, Saturday at 8.
Since President Trump last Wednesday signed the executive order ending his zero-tolerance policy, the administration said they would immediately start reuniting the more than 2,000 children separated from their parents. So a few days went by and there weren't a lot of details. Then a few more went by and there still wasn't a lot of details. And in fact, this program and our teams on the ground were hearing there was little, if any, reunification happening at all. We're not the only ones not getting answers. At least one Republican lawmaker isn't either. Here's what Texas Congressman Will Hurd said this morning on New Day.
One of the concerns I have is HHS's ability to do this. We were supposed to have a conference call yesterday with members of Congress and their staff to talk about this process, and the phone number didn't work. So if they can't do that with us, I'm concerned with the ability of connecting kids.
The phone number didn't work. We're continuing to ask for updates, and so today Health and Human Services had a conference call with reporters. Did not go so well. Take a listen.
I'm wondering first, are you still receiving children who are coming into your care because of parental detention? We know that there's an implementation phase on the executive order.
As we mentioned earlier, we can get you that information as soon as possible, and we appreciate your patience. All right,
great. No, actually, it's really important. Are you guys still, excuse me, are you still receiving children who are there because of the parental separation policy?
I believe we've answered you gave us 3 questions. We responded to your question, and I asked that you send that to media@hhs.gov.
I'm so sorry. I didn't hear an answer to
your final question.
So joining me now is Sunderland Safadi, who was one of the reporters on that call. So the call was meant to answer questions. We just heard from that. I mean, it seemed anything but answering.
That's right. There was a lot that they would not or could not answer tonight, Anderson, but we did get one new bit of information that's important. They did reveal today that there are currently 2,047 children who were separated from their families that are still in HHS custody. Now, the last time the administration did give us a number was on Saturday night, when they said then that there were 2,053 children in custody. So this suggests that only 6 children, just 6 children, have been reunified with their guardians since the executive order was signed by President Trump last Wednesday. But very notable here, and you heard that in the audio, they would not answer, most importantly, if they are still receiving children as a result of this zero tolerance policy.
So if they are still receiving children, which for some reason they were unable to answer, which seems pretty extraordinary, they're not able to answer that right away, it's possible they reunited more than 6 children, but they just got more kids coming in, but we don't know the answer to that because they apparently don't know.
That's right, and that's why this non-answer is so important here. They are saying that currently there's 2,047 children, but if more children were coming in, of course, it throws off those numbers. And I should note that, there were some promises that they could potentially get back to some of our questions, but they were at many times pushed by reporters tonight, said that these things were fluid. This is a dynamic situation. That's why they said they could not give many more specific data points to us reporters tonight, like including the ages of the children being held currently. They would not answer that. That's in large part, I think, what led to this rather contentious call at times. CNN, as well as many other media outlets, have been pushing for days for a full accounting of what's going on with these children. And I think the attempt this evening to mitigate all those questions clearly highlighted that there are many, many more questions they have left to answer.
Wait a minute. So the U.S. government will not even say what the ages of the children, the more than 2,000 children that are being held are, like what age range they go from? And that's incredible.
That's right. They were asked that question, and they did not answer that question. They said they would not reveal the ages. They said they would not talk about policy on this call. They said beyond that one data point of 2,047 children still being held at the HHS, they said they would not give any more data points, and they wouldn't even answer questions about the data points beyond just saying, email in your questions, which, of course, CNN and many other outlets have been doing on a daily basis.
Wow. Sunderland, I appreciate it. Thanks very much. We'll keep following it. Up next, we're going to check in with some of the President Trump supporters in Texas, see what they think of the so-called zero-tolerance policy on immigration, the reaction from some of them ahead. But despite the chaos and confusion we just heard, a call where HHS wouldn't even answer basic questions about thousands of children being separated from their parents at the border. Along the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, President Trump's stand on immigration is mostly getting a warm reception. Ed Levendera tonight reports.
Welcome to the wall. With that kind of introduction, it's no surprise immigration is the hot topic for Sergio Sanchez's radio show in the South Texas Rio Grande Valley.
We broadcast from blessed soil, north of the river.
He's a staunch Trump Republican and credits the president with taking a tough approach to border security.
With President Trump, we have someone who is making a serious attempt to enforce rule of law and enforce border law and enforce our sovereign border with Mexico and get a hold of the situation.
Christina Garfield has lived along the border all her life. She comes from a family of Democrats, but she, like Trump, sees a threat in the flow of illegal immigration.
My biggest concern with the people that are coming over our borders is safety. Safety is a huge deal down here.
Trump is far from popular here in Hidalgo County, Texas, where much of the zero-tolerance policy attention has been focused. He only won 28% of the vote. But there is an undercurrent of conservative Latino voters who kind of defy conventional political wisdom. They're unfazed by Trump's rhetoric that undocumented immigrants are, in using Trump's words here, invading the country.
He doesn't sugarcoat anything. I think the people of the United States appreciate that also. I don't think it's a bad thing.
When you hear people talk about the way he talks about this issue, that it comes off as racist to them, what do you say to that?
Yeah, well, that's their problem. They hear what they want to hear, and they say what they want to say. Hey, it's a free country. They can believe in that.
Joaquim Hernandez is president of the county's Young Republicans chapter. He walks us through the produce distribution warehouse where he works as the human resources director. He says the president needs to compromise on immigration.
When you hear about, families being separated, the zero tolerance policy, you think, we're the family of, we're the party of the family, family, faith, and freedom, and you think about families being separated, and it doesn't look very civil.
But Hernandez is also exhausted by Trump's divisiveness.
There are some things that he says that sometimes you gotta cringe and be like, how am I gonna defend that?
You're tired of sticking up for him.
Yeah. I don't get anything for having to stick up for him.
Or Mr. Donald J. Trump. And
there are plenty of Trump supporters willing to fight that fight, even in South Texas, where there aren't many around. And Anderson, even though we've well documented over the last few weeks that it was the Trump administration policy that led to this issue of family separation, Trump supporters we spoke with here in South Texas feel that the president has been compassionate on this issue, and they actually blame Congress, not the president, for not doing enough here.
Ed Levendare, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Voters in 7 states are going to the polls tonight. Among those on a ballot, former presidential candidate Mitt Romney running for a Senate seat in Utah. Details on that ahead. 7 states hold primary races today, and polls either have closed or are closing in the east. There's a couple we're keeping our eyes on. In South Carolina, Republican Governor Henry McMaster faces businessman John Warren. President Trump was in South Carolina last night campaigning for McMaster. Polls closed at 7. Right now, McMaster is up by about 10 percentage points, with more than 50% of precincts reporting. On Staten Island in New York, the incumbent Republican Donovan faces former Republican Congressman Michael Grimm, who once threatened to throw a reporter off a congressional balcony. He's a former FBI agent. Grimm left Congress in 2015, pleading guilty to tax evasion. President Trump has endorsed his opponent. Polls in New York close at 9 p.m. And out west, former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney is heavily favored in his primary race to gain a Senate seat. Polls close there at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll, of course, track all the races and more throughout the night, so stay tuned for that. That's it for us. Time to hand it over to Chris. Cuomo Primetime starts now. Chris?
All right, thank you, Anderson. I am Chris Cuomo, and welcome to Primetime. It is on now. The battle of us versus them that the president trumpets at every turn has become a fight for the soul of this country. The latest salvo from the right, the attorney general, desperate to stay in President Trump's good-ish graces, refers to Democrats as radicalized, as in the terrorism term, and cracks jokes about separating kids from their parents. Congressman Steve King upped the ante, saying America may be headed for another civil war. The division is so intense, King refuses to delete a tweet, even though he says he doesn't agree with the hateful things sponsored by the guy he retweeted. Why? He's here to tell you in a second. The battle may come down to immigration. Those for a melting pot were dealt a blow today. Unsurprisingly, the Supreme Court authorized the president's travel ban as good law, but left whether it is a good policy up to you, the voters. It's watered down from the original, but the message is still clear. All are not welcome. So, who are we? What are we about in America? They are big questions that must be answered. That's why we've all gathered tonight. So, let's get after it. We didn't start the fire. No, we didn't light it, but we tried to fight it. You remember those words from Billy Joel's 1989 song? Well, it's an anthem once again for what's going on right now, right here. But President Trump has changed the lyrics. He isn't trying to fight it. He is a flamethrower, turbocharging fears, concerns about America being changed for the worse by others. There is a fundamental battle afoot. Is our future as a nation one of inclusion or exclusion? Now, our first guest is a leader of the part of the Republican Party that the president needs most, the hardliners on immigration, Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King. Welcome to Primetime, sir.
Good to be back, Chris.
All right, so Congressman, help me understand this thing with the tweet, the guy that you retweeted. I'll put it up there on the screen for people. You have said, look, I was looking to retweet an article about people becoming more suspicious of who comes into their country. That's what I was trying to get at. I don't agree with Colette. I'm not a neo-Nazi. I don't embrace what he's about. That's all true, right?
Well, it's generally true. I don't know that's an exact quote, but what I'm trying to say is that here's a story that says that 65% of the Italians under 35 have had enough with immigration.
Right.
And I said, when will America wake up on this?
But the
we see it the same
guy
way.
has espoused ugly neo-Nazi type principles, and you do not agree with those. Is that true, sir?
Well, obviously not, but that's what you all say. I have no idea who he is. I don't know why we're giving him a world-famous name now into the news. I'm not obligated to do a full background check on anybody
Well, it's
that
pretty
has their
obvious
name
what
on
he's about, but
something
I'm
that
not
I happen
saying
to
you
agree
knew.
with. Yeah.
I'm not saying
Oh,
you
absolutely.
knew.
You know I didn't, Chris.
But that's
You know
the
I
part,
didn't.
and that's what the part is that I don't understand. I don't believe that you recognize his values as your own, but you say, but I won't delete the tweet.
Right.
I don't get it.
It's pretty simple. It's
Why?
pretty simple. I tweeted a Breitbart story. I didn't tweet a message from him. I tweeted a Breitbart story. I recognized the screenshot as Breitbart, and I tweeted it. And I went back a little bit later when some folks pointed this out, and I went and got the tiny URL, and I tweeted the Breitbart story off of their website. And I said, this is what I intended to send. I'm not deleting that, because then you all pile on me and say King had to apologize, he was wrong, he knows he's guilty. I'm not. I don't feel guilty one bit. I'm human.
Right, right. But I don't get it. It's human to err, right?
Yes.
But
that's why I corrected it.
Right, but you
saw me correct it.
You said don't give the guy a platform, but you won't take down the retweet, so you're giving him a platform.
I don't have him up on CNN, bringing him up as the most important story.
But the reason I'm talking about it is because you won't pull back from the position, and
But
it seems
that's
because
not why.
you wanted. No, not because you believe in what he's saying. I'm giving you that. I give you that. I'm not here to say that you are a neo-Nazi, okay? That you know me better than that. I'm here to say that you're so caught up in this us versus them thing with the left and the right that you don't want to give ground on even something that you acknowledge is wrong. How nuts is that?
No. I retweeted a Breitbart story. That wasn't wrong. He was an anonymous individual until you and others highlighted his name. Let's let him ride into the rearview mirror and not get all wrapped around the axle about this. It's a nothing story, Chris. It's a nothing story. There's
But here's the
serious
thing.
business to talk about.
When you gave him a platform and when you have refused to take it down, you have given license to people who share his thoughts. I'm sure your staffers have pointed out to you that on social media, you got a lot of ugly people using your name, waving it as a flag of someone who accepts what they're about, and getting into all their ideas because you retweeted this guy.
Chris, I'm not aware of any of that, but I am aware of many leftists that are attacking me, trying to get me to take this down. I'm not taking it down. It was simply a Breitbart story that I tweeted. It had a guy's name on it that I had never heard of. Now a lot of people have heard of his name. It's going to stay there on my website as long as it takes. It's going to go into
Even
the
though
rearview
he's
mirror.
about all these ugly ideas, and even Paul Ryan, who's not in the the mode of getting into fights with his own, said there's no place for this in the dialogue.
Paul Ryan didn't say anything. His spokesperson made a general comment that didn't even have my name in it. And so that really isn't a story either. But you cannot assign someone, and I guess you really didn't at this point. You say, I don't buy into those values, and I reject them. My ancestors fought Nazism. I'm about freedom, I'm about God-given liberty. This is a great country we stand in. I'm standing in Statuary Hall today. You've stood in here before.
Yes, I have.
And gaze around and look at you. I believe in this country. I believe in the pillars of American exceptionalism. I want to restore them. I don't want to tear them down. We do have freedom of speech in this country.
Sure.
I'm watching that be suppressed around the country with intimidation attacks on my colleagues. I think they waited about a year for the anniversary of the shooting of Steve Scalise and others, and now started to challenge the members of this administration out in the restaurants and around in the streets of America. That is something we should be concerned about, Chris.
Well, look, we've been talking about it on the show. I don't think that this hostility helps anybody on either side, but it's getting worse and worse, Congressman, and you're a part of the mix on this. It seems so clear to me that immigration has become the ultimate battleground of all of these competing ideas. And you seem to represent one very specific school of thought, which is this is going to be a shuttered nation. You'll say it's about the rule of law, but it's about only wanting certain kinds of people here, whether it's the travel ban, whether it's what we see with separating families. It's a very us versus them mentality right now, Congressman, and you're part of it.
But you see what you're doing? You're assigning me a belief system. Those things never came out of my mouth. I'm about people that want to become Americans. I do say that. I've got an op-ed out there today that says so. I want to welcome people that look at America and say, I'd like to achieve the American dream too, and I want to help the country I'm coming to, and American values do count. And we are a Judeo-Christian country. We believe in free enterprise, freedom of speech, religion, and the press, the Second Amendment. The list goes on and on. We know what made America great. And by the way, there's another piece of this we don't talk about, Chris, and I think it's important. I think we'd agree on this. There's been a self-selecting vigor that's come into America. The people that decided to immigrate into the United States of America were the ones that had the ambition, the ones that wanted to achieve their vision of success. And so if there were 10 children in a family anywhere in the world, in any donor country that's there, the ones that came to America were self-selected with more vigor than those that didn't select to come here. And that's one of the reasons why this is a great country as well.
But I don't say, why do you say we don't talk about that? It seems to be an endemic part of the conversation, because right now it's about whether or not those people will still get the chance, because really the battle with you guys isn't so much on illegal immigration. And we can talk, if you'd like, about, you know, the insistence of saying that the left is about open borders. Now, I talk to these people all the time, try to get one of them to admit they're about open borders. They gave you the wall. Chuck Schumer said, I'll give you the wall for DACA. They're clearly not about open borders or lawlessness. So
it doesn't look to me like they're ready to give us the wall for DACA.
Have you ever had a Democrat say to you, I want open borders, no laws, and everybody to come in whenever they want?
I don't know that I can quote any here that have actually said that, but I've never either said that.
But then why do you say they're all for open borders?
But the policy that they're for is for open borders. We served it up to them. If it's been in this Congress, it was voted on last week. The Goodlatte bill went down. That had wall money in it, had enforcement in it, and they rejected it.
Right,
and
but that doesn't mean they're for open borders. Look, and here's the proof, Steve. I have proof. I interviewed Chuck Schumer about it. I don't even know if I even used this in the interview, but it goes right to this point. Just listen to this.
I put that deal on the table in the Oval Office in a sincere effort at compromise. I put the wall on the table in exchange for strong DACA protections.
All right, now this was in January, because he said it in the interview, and he said, go back and look, and we did, and he had said it. So the idea of saying they want open borders every time they don't accept what you want, you know what that does? It feeds the us versus them. It makes them a putative enemy to the Republican base, that they're about something different than you are. Why do that?
I think
Why
they are
so
about something
division?
different.
But they're not about
and
open borders and lawlessness. It's about how we invite people to this country. It's fundamentally different.
But, Chris, they were defending MS-13.
They are not defending MS-13. Nancy Pelosi never
No.
defended MS-13.
When President Trump referred to them as animals, there was a hyperventilation going on among the left that you couldn't talk about people in terms and call them animals. I mean, that was defending MS-13 by about anybody's standard. And by the way,
No,
that
it's what
statement
you
that came out of
made
by
it.
Chuck Schumer.
It's what you made it about. But go ahead. What's your point
I didn't
about Chuck
actually get
Schumer?
involved in that dialogue myself, but I believe I recall President Trump saying Chuck Schumer withdrew that offer. And because President Trump
he rejected the offer. They put the wall on the table. Then it became about money. Schumer says, you guys, not you, you're in the House, but Republicans in the Senate wouldn't give him more money to earmark for the wall than the $25 billion over those years that was there. But whether that's true or not, to say they're for open borders, it's just selling a line that is untrue and made to make them look like an enemy to you.
You can define open borders probably a little bit differently, and maybe we do that. But they're promising citizenship to nearly everybody that can get into America, unless they are the kind of criminals that cause them to be politically vulnerable. I stood here in this Capitol building near this Capitol building in about 2005 or so, when Teddy Kennedy went out here just to the right of where I am right now to the west lawn, stood up at the podium. That lawn was full of bussed-in. Many of them were self-professed illegal, and he said to them, and he had an interpreter, but I heard him say it in English. He said, "Some say report to be deported. I say report to become an American citizen."
But even that wouldn't be open borders, and a lot of members of your own party want Dreamers to be part of this.
For a moment. When I heard that, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, because I knew he had uttered the axiom that was going to lead that party into the next generation. That was the promise. But look, and not only that, Hillary Clinton made that promise over and over again during the campaign.
But many members of your party in both houses of Congress believe that the Dreamers should have a pathway to citizenship. I know you don't, and it's a legitimate policy debate, but it's how you define the debate that I wanted to bring you on for tonight. You say, well, it's just about the law enforcement. I'm not seeing it, because you say, I'm not part of the MS-13 mess. I'm just pointing out what the Democrats did, which is an unfair reckoning of it. But you have. You put out a picture of kids saying they look like perfect recruits for MS-13. You don't know anything about these kids. You don't know if they're anything to do with a gang.
I can see a picture. I can see a picture. They were declared to be young boys by, let's see, Stormy Daniels' attorney. He put that out, said they're young boys. And I looked at that and say, no, these boys are, as I said, they're old enough to be tried as adults. They're old enough to serve in the military. They could be prime gang recruitment age.
But why? Why paint them with that brush? The first two are factually true. The first one's a little suggestive of malintent with where their behavior would be involved.
I didn't suggest any intent. I said they're prime gang age recruitment.
But you are making it sound like they are would-be gang members. When you talked about Muslims working in your pork plants and say, I don't want Muslims working in my pork plant because they need extra explanation.
But I didn't say that.
What did you say?
Chris, you got to have a sense of humor here.
Here's the soundbite. Let the audience hear it, and then you judge it.
Please do that, and I hope they have a sense of humor.
The rationale is that it's infidels that are eating this pork. They're not eating it. So as long as they're preparing this pork for infidels, it helps send them to hell, and it must make Allah happy.
Jeez.
I don't want people doing my pork that won't eat it.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
You still here?
You're saying they're trying to kill us.
Would you want somebody running a winery that wouldn't taste the wine? Would you want somebody preparing your food that says, if you eat this, you're going to go to hell?
Steve. I wouldn't think they're trying to kill me. Is that what you think?
I didn't say they were trying to kill me.
You said they have infidels, which, by the way, all Muslims don't think you're an infidel. You're talking about terrorists, okay, who think that.
No, I didn't say terrorists.
You said infidels.
I did the research on
Muslims who believe Steve King is an infidel are terrorist types, radicalized people who believe a perversion of their own faith.
To eat. That is an exact quote from an authority.
So what if you have vegetarians working in your meat plant, Steve King? Do you want them out too?
I'd be a little worried about that, yes.
No,
and I would razz them as well.
I
call them the vegan lobby. I'm always doing battle with HSUS.
But that's my point, is that this us versus them thing, you're picking on these people and you're trying to point out to your constituents that they're not like them, that they're different. And I think it's dangerous because that's how I got here. You know, I was one of these subgroups, as you call them. You know, that's who we are, Steve King. That's who we are in this country.
Let's just go to that subgroup piece. Nobody's ever answered that question I asked. It was rhetorical in a way, but they've been
obviously
for 2 years
not if you wanted to answer. But go ahead. What's the question?
Well, I mean, the point that when you said subgroups that I have discussed before, I said what subgroup has contributed more than Western civilization?
No, you said white civilization.
I didn't. I did not say that.
I have it in front of my face from the Daily Beast. It's an old article, but it's not an old idea for you.
Well, in print means nothing these days. I read a lot of that stuff in print, even your own print.
Steve King.
If it's videotape,
Steve King, do you
listen
think
to
I take you out of context? Do you think I get your words wrong? Do you think I'm unfair?
I'm saying if there's something in print and you say it's a quote from me, it doesn't mean it's a quote from me. If you got a video, run the video. I know what I said. And
but
we
I'm
have
saying
the video.
Why
and I'll post it tomorrow.
Why keep painting people who are others as somehow suspicious? If they're working in a meat plant, you got to be careful.
Why do they attack somebody
if
that
they're
defends
boys, you got to think they might be in a gang. Why do that to them?
The core and the greatness of America is Western civilization. We wouldn't be the country we were if we were not that.
No,
why are
but
people
we also
attacking anybody that defends it?
No.
Chris, do you embrace Western civilization? Do you recognize its contribution to your life?
I know. I just see people like me as part of it. I see people who come.
Would you say to people that come here, you should take a look at this and embrace these pillars of American exceptionalism?
But I think we do that, and that's why the assimilation of all these different people into America as Americans has been our strength and our greatness. The Chinese who worked on the railroads, the mass of melting pot of immigrants that built our tunnels and built our bridges and thought up our technology and the rules for our civilization. They're not all white.
But they came here to embrace Americanism, and today the left is teaching them to reject assimilation. And that's been going on for 25 to 30 years.
That's not true. What's teaching them to reject assimilation is people who call their kids...
I know that's true.
Hold on. You need to hear this. making people think about the value of assimilation is when their kids get called would-be gang members. And when they hear themselves being hinted at as maybe wanting to hurt the rest of us and they shouldn't work in places if they won't eat the food, that's what makes people think that they're not being accepted. Laws like a travel ban, watching kids get separated from parents in the name of enforcing the law, that's what makes people think they don't belong.
One piece out of that tweet that I sent, Chris, and that is that these young men certainly come from one of the top 10 most violent countries in the world. So
America is one of the top 10 most violent countries in the world, Steve King. It doesn't make us all bad people.
Our violent death rate here is 5.56 per 100,000. They come from places where there's 92, 94 violent deaths per 100,000. And that's not even Mexico.
But I'm
violent.
talking about countries with fully formed economies and opportunity who should be doing better. We have our own struggles. As the president of the United States like to say all the time, North Korea, like other people haven't done bad things. Russia, like we haven't killed some people. He's so ready to admit the fault of America when it serves him. You should admit it now. We're not a perfect place.
I don't want to admit the faults of America. I want to embrace the greatness of America.
But our greatness is our diversity.
Let's
end the interview on that.
And we have people over on your side of the aisle that are doing sit-ins and
don't
shutting
say
down
my
the
side
ICE
of the
locations.
aisle. I sit in the middle.
Well, okay.
I look to the left. Joker's to the left of me. What's the rest of the song from?
We were going to get to humor here. You're not on the left, no, Chris. But
Clowns
and I'm
to
not
the
on the
left
right
of me,
either.
Jokers to the right. Here I am, as Smirkanish says on his radio show.
Literally positioned someplace in the middle, but
Steve
that's
King,
physical.
Let me get us to see if you can agree on one thing when we end this interview. The strength of this country has been found in its composition, which has always been about diversity, especially in times of need. The waves of immigrants who've come into this country have helped America be her greatest. Will you acknowledge that?
It's not diversity that is our strength, it's the assimilation that binds the diversity together that is our strength. And we have people that come from all donor countries in the world that have added to this culture and civilization, many of them in very vigorous ways, as I described earlier, and the reasons for that. But if we don't have assimilation, we are not going to have the strengths of diversity. Diversity will
and if we
eventually
want people to
divide us.
assimilate, you've got to embrace them for who they are and what they're about, as long as they're not hurting anybody else.
They need to embrace America for who we are.
Right, and we need
to
embrace, and you need to embrace America for what is as well. It's a two-way street.
I do that.
It's a two-way
every
street.
day, and I thank God for our liberties.
Their words, and the Statue of Liberty has words on the bottom of it we don't want to forget as well. Steve King.
We never voted on that, Chris. So
I hope you don't reject the words of the new Colossus,
I don't reject those words. I think they're actually inspiring, but it's not a national policy.
Well, that's a sad statement. We'll end the interview.
It's just true.
Well, it can be sad and true at the same time. We'll see what the policy is as this war over immigration is settled. Thank you for being part of the conversation on the show.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. So, look, I know there are parts of you out there who say, I don't want to hear from Steve King. I get it. I get why you feel that way, but that's not a good way to feel. You have to hear. The part of the Republican Party that King represents is vibrant and a big part of what Trump is lobbying on the immigration battle right now. So, tweet me at Chris Cuomo, disagree with decency, tell me what you didn't like, and we're going to read some of the responses later in the program and see if we can bridge where people are on this. Okay, so what do we know about the Trump administration? It's demanding civility, but it reminds me of a line from the movie The Princess Bride. You remember when they kept saying with the word inconceivable? They keep on using that word. I do not think it means what they think it means. The proof? The flame throwing by the Attorney General in the name of civility? More troubling than what he said is why he said it. And it sets up the great debate. Look at these two handsome men, Van Jones, Jason Miller. Next. Own your prettiness, Van Jones. All right, it's a battle of us versus them, and here I have them as an acronym, all right? Them, T, the tariffs, the bad hombres that Trump talks about, the law of exclusion, we'll explain in a second, and M for Muslims. We see it playing out all around us. What happened with the kids? It was a message of harshness. That was the point of it all along. Come at your own risk, no matter what you're running from. The proof? He didn't even prepare for his own productivity. The administration knew they were going to explode the population, but no provisions for accommodations, no provisions for due process. Why? Because Trump wasn't about the practicality. He was about the animus. And that's why it's an ongoing nightmare. It's not over. For some reason, we're just not talking about it enough. They're still not being reunited. They're still not exactly sure what they're going to do. Why? Because that's what they wanted. Now, what did we see? Well, with the ban today, can he do this? Yes, the Supreme Court said the law does allow a president to limit immigration, even if he wants to do it from places with people he doesn't like. The travel ban is in effect. Trump's reaction? The wall comes next. Why would he step on a headline about the ban, talking about the wall? Because it's all part of his plan. The key phrase, the law of exclusion. This is about enforcing the law. We do have to be a nation of laws. But his main rule is a law of exclusion, okay? Us versus them. And them are not just brown-skinned people or Muslims. It's about ideas, hence the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, calling the rhetoric of opponents of taking kids from parents radicalized. Take a listen.
The rhetoric we hear from the other side on this issue, as on many others, has become radicalized. We hear views on television today that are on the lunatic fringe, frankly. And what is perhaps more galling is the hypocrisy. They like the little security around themselves. And if you try to scale the fence, believe me, they'll be even too happy to have you arrested and separated from your children.
So, you saw the joke there at the end. That's for his discretion. But you saw that he read the word radicalized. What does that mean? It's intentional. And yes, it is the kind of word that we reserve for terrorism. It was used on purpose, us versus them. And also, there's another kicker in there. Sessions is hungry for approval. But he's also an example of the capitulation of a party, okay? What did we see with the GOP? McConnell, shortened there for whiteboard reasons, smiling with the justice that helped the travel ban through, Gorsuch. And the justices that the judges that they're getting through are an untold part of the story of reinforcing the us versus them cultural priorities. We will take that on in this show over time. We also saw Paul Ryan, once a moral standard for the right, who called out Barack Obama for unpresidential rhetoric, but never once has told Trump to apologize for any of his ugliness as president. And then he gave a soft stance on one of his own members. Steve King was just on retweeting a neo-Nazi, saying, yeah, that shouldn't be part of the dialogue. But Maxine Waters, the Democrat, she should apologize, he says in full voice. Why? Well, telling people to protest the administration. We don't need that. Take a listen.
That's dangerous for our society. It's dangerous for our democracy. She should apologize, and there's just no place for that in our public discourse.
I could play you a dozen examples of the president saying things that are so much more inflammatory, and Ryan, crickets. So now Trump is getting what he's been looking for, a fight. Maxine Waters calling for a shame campaign, people harassing administration officials in public and private. What has Trump done? He exaggerated Waters' intentions, saying that she was calling for harm. She never said that. It's not true. But why did he do it? Because he traffics in the anger that comes from either side. And so here we are, ugly and ugly on both sides. There will be no winning, but there is a battle. And it all comes down to immigration. How this policy battle goes, so goes our country. So there is a lot to debate. Let's get into it with Van Jones and Jason Miller. It's good to have you both, Van Jones. I start with you. The battle of us versus them. Is it real? Is it in effect? And what is the intention by the administration?
Well, I mean, it's clearly real, and unfortunately, you know, the President of the United States has found a formula to kind of keep this, conflict going. He throws punches, and then if anybody throws a punch back at him, he says, "Oh, we're being victimized." I was especially disappointed to see Paul Ryan. You're correct. Paul Ryan had the chance to be a moral leader and a moral giant. His big hero, Jack Kemp, who always stood up to bigotry. Paul Ryan started out doing that during the campaign of Donald Trump, but then he backed down from it. So he brought the taxes down, which Jack Kemp would like, but he did not bring the moral rhetoric up. Paul Ryan, when he had the opportunity. So if anybody should apologize, Paul Ryan should apologize to the country. He should apologize to Jack Kemp for not doing his job to hold everybody to a high standard. One of the big disasters in this country is that there's nobody on the right that's been able to hold that moral standard high, and Paul Ryan had that opportunity and failed.
But listen, Jason, that's over, that fight, right? We know what the party is now. The party is the party of Trump. Separating families, that's not Reagan-esque republicanism. We know what their immigration policy was for the party back then. Nobody's saying anything because they're not going against Trump. Isn't it over?
Well, I think people are definitely embracing the policies of President Trump. I mean, that's the reason why he got 306 electoral votes in 2016 and won over a number of states that Republicans traditionally don't win, whether it's Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin. But I think there's something that's going on here over the last, really even over the last week, where I think things have gotten way too inflammatory and way too heated. That
what did you expect, Jason?
But hold on.
I mean,
but Chris, people can have, Van and I can have very civil debates on issues back and forth, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show and do such. But you look at the comments that Congresswoman Maxine Waters made over the weekend, where it might not have been inciting mob violence, it might have been just a threshold below, it may have been inciting mob harassment, but encouraging people to form a crowd. She actually said create a crowd and confront them at restaurants, at department stores, at gas stations, and say, you're not welcome here. We're going to, and I'm paraphrasing
I hear
slightly,
you. Let's compare it, because I want to see if your emotion stays equal. Let's play something from somebody else I think you may be impressed by and what they say. Here.
Get him out. Try not to hurt him. If you do, I'll defend you in court. Don't worry about it. If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. I don't know if I would have done well, but I would have been out there fighting, folks. I don't know if I would have done well, but I would have been boom, boom, boom. Beat that.
Where's your high dudgeon now, my brother?
Well, I think that they're apples and oranges here. I think the president was joking around. Yes, I do. And in fact, don't just take it from me. PolitiFact even did a write-up on this evening where they had a lawyer from the ACLU.
You're citing PolitiFact. Every time I've used it with you, you've said that they're a lefty organization. You can't believe what they're saying.
Pull the tape on that one. I don't remember that conversation.
Yeah, okay,
but
I will.
PolitiFact even had a lawyer from the ACLU saying that did not rise to the level of inciting things the same way that another lawyer said that it was with Maxine Waters. But again, it's not even just Maxine Waters where it's saying get in the face of people. I mean, the fact that we're targeting now staff, that we're targeting members of administration.
Look, I don't like it. I don't think it's productive. I don't think it's good. But
Chris,
but the idea that you're insulating the president.
I don't like it when they do it. I don't like it when.
But you know what? But hold on. So let's bring
either.
Van back in, because Van, here, look, I dealt with this last night also. I have Jason on the show. I have Rick Santorum on the show. I want a lot of different kinds of voices, and I believe it's important for people. Don't shut out anybody, even if you don't agree with everything. But Van, they're never full-throated about what the president says. It's always qualified. It's always okay. There's always an escape hatch. And then Maxine Waters says something, and it's civility time.
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with it because I don't like double standards. I wrote a whole book chastising both liberals and conservatives for this type of stuff. So if I want to challenge the president or anybody else on it, I've got a clear record. My problem is the people who don't have a clear record on their own side. You know, Bobby Kennedy, who died years ago this year, said moral courage is not standing up to your enemies. Anybody's going to stand up to their enemies. Moral courage is when you stand up to your friends. And the problem that we have right now is all these people who are jumping up and down on Maxine Waters have never, ever had remotely the same level of passion challenging a president in their own party. And I disagree. I don't care if it's PolitiFact or anybody else. If any grown man stands up in front of a crowd of people or a grown woman and says the stuff that Donald Trump said at those rallies, that person is horrifically irresponsible. If it was your kid, if it was your husband, if it was your employee, they would be in deep doo-doo, and yet we apologize for the president doing it, and it's wrong.
And Jason, it was last night. You know, he points to the back of the room, fake media. You see the way they treat the media? Why? Because they're being encouraged. It's being reinforced. It's ugly. That's why I said to you, what did you expect? Not because I think it's right. As soon as Maxine Waters put out those calls and we saw how they were being made manifest, they said, be careful. If you've had enough of Trump, why would you use the same tactics as Trump? I don't know how that's making us better, sweeter, smarter, or more productive. So I see the shortness of it, but when I say to you, what did you expect? This is what you invite.
Well, no, I disagree on that. I feel like, Chris, we're getting a bit of kind of the ultimate game of whataboutism here. I mean, look, President Trump has obviously said that he's a counterpuncher, and when people swing at him verbally, he's going to punch back. If people want to go and criticize people, that's fine. That's your free speech. You have the right to do so. But it's completely different what Maxine Waters was doing, where she was saying
she never told anybody to harm anybody. When the president says she wants to harm, she's going to get somebody hurt.
And tell them they're not welcome here. Well, then, Chris, what about the wanted poster with Stephen Miller? In a wanted poster, I don't care what the fine print says in 2-point font down at the bottom. When you're making wanted posters for someone who works in the White House, the very clear message that you're sending is it is a call to action that you want some harm to happen to that person.
And you know what?
The fact
and
that
I don't
Sarah
like
Sanders,
it. And I don't like it. And I don't like whataboutism. But I got to tell you something, Van Jones, when the President of the United States, then a citizen, is trying his damnedest to convince people that the president is a Muslim who wasn't born in this country, who's some kind of Manchurian candidate, that was pretty damn dangerous too. And you didn't hear Jason Miller or anybody else opposing it.
Yeah, look, I can't disagree with that. I mean, part of the thing is, I just want to kind of take a step back here. Why are you seeing people like Maxine Waters and others getting to this level of exasperation? The president has done this act with regard to these children at the border and other things, and people are starting to feel helpless. And they're starting to feel that Congress isn't doing anything, the Supreme Court seems to be going against them, and when people feel helpless, they have a choice to make. Now, I would say moral witness on behalf of your views is a good thing. But it has to be done in a nonviolent way. It has to be done in a constructive way. It has to be done in a way where nobody can accuse you of putting somebody else at risk. That's the Dr. King standard. So I don't want to be in a world where people say you can't bear moral witness. If you see somebody, you can't sing, you can't pray, you can't sit in, you can't do anything because we want to be so civil that we can't bear moral witness. But at the same time, you've got to do it the right way. And I will be tough on my liberal progressive friends to say our standard has to be the Dr. King standard. We're not going to lower our standard for Donald Trump or anybody else. I don't care how upset we are. We have to do it the right way.
And so by that definition, Van, you would agree that Maxine Waters did not reach that threshold. And I would just be curious, by your definition, what you think about Sarah Sanders being kicked out of a restaurant.
Listen, look, I'm a civil rights guy. And so for me, you know, open accommodations, public accommodations is something that my grandparents fought for, my parents fought for, and I fought for. So the idea of anybody being asked to leave any restaurant, a gay person not being able to access a wedding cake, those things really, really bother me. At the same time, I'm consistent about that. My concern is when you have people saying it's okay to throw somebody out of a restaurant if they're gay, but then you can't ask somebody to leave a restaurant if their politics are, you know, frankly, very, very troubling from a human rights perspective. Let's just be consistent. You know, I try to be consistent. My problem is a double standard. My problem is a hypocrisy. And at a certain point, I think people on your side of the aisle, sir, you have the House, you have the Senate, you have the White House, and now you have the Supreme Court. Would you please take responsibility for the conduct of people on your side and quit worrying about every little thing that every little Democrat does?
So
it's beneath you and beneath your party.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different perspective, Van, and say that I think that ultimately everybody needs to watch their own actions and their own behavior. It's up to each individual person to make sure that they're treating others with respect. And so I would say that nobody should be kicked out of a restaurant for any reason. I think that's ridiculous. Nobody, whether you're a political opponent or someone on the other side, should be harassed in public or yelled at or screamed, or there shouldn't be wanted
Do you feel
posters.
do you feel the same way about lesbians and gays trying to get a wedding cake?
Look, the Supreme Court has already gone in and decided that.
No, but
so
you personally.
That's
Personally.
you personally. I think as long as it's not absolutely tearing up someone's values, that you shouldn't be going denying people services.
It's always easy to criticize the other side.
Values.
That's what I believe.
People are holding on to their own, and that's why we are stuck. But you know what? All conversation that is decent helps, and this one goes in the books as that. Van Jones, Jason Miller, thanks to you both. All right, we were talking here about today's Supreme Court ruling. Look, you can go Google and lots of different types of thoughts. It is not surprising on the law, okay? They never said it is a good policy. To be sure, politically, it throws more fuel on the fire of an already explosive debate. We have a lawmaker who is actively trying to overhaul our immigration system here, and his name is Senator Ron Johnson. He's also fighting to keep migrant families together. He is the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. He is there. Good to see you, sir. I'll get to you in a second. The president is claiming a tremendous victory after the Supreme Court upheld his travel ban. He originally called for a total ban of Muslims entering the country during the campaign. It later morphed into what he called a watered down and politically correct version, but he's still celebrating. Why? because it still feeds the us versus them culture war that he very much relishes. Is it a win for you? That's a good question. Let's ask it to the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, Republican Ron Johnson. Senator, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, Chris, how you doing?
Well, so the travel ban. You had said that you saw this as a reasonable accommodation from the first version of it. Are you okay with the court's finding today?
Well, I think the court's finding is correct. We have given the president a great deal of latitude in terms of running our refugee system and our immigration laws. From the standpoint of national security, this was a very clear-cut court decision. I was kind of surprised at the lower court's decision, so it didn't surprise me at all the Supreme Court ruled in the president's favor.
Well, they were playing on policy, the lower courts, right? They were saying we don't like this policy because it is offensive of the...
It was judicial activism.
It is offensive. Well, you know, but everybody always says that when they don't like the decision, right? You're going to get plenty of judicial activism now in your favor, so you will like it, right? That's the way the game works.
Oh,
However,
no. What we're trying to do is we're trying to confirm judges that apply the law don't alter it. That's a famous quote by Neil Gorsuch. I agree with that.
Yeah, and Gorsuch,
I'm trying to confirm
said that he would be his own man. And he has voted not only in consistency with Scalia, but with Clarence Thomas. So he is farther to the right than he ever suggested he was even possible of being. And that's okay, because elections have consequences. But let's not make it like there's one standard that's more pure than the other. You partisans play the same game, and you play to advance.
What we ought to do, Chris, is try and find areas of agreement.
Right.
And I really came on to talk about the immigration.
Yes.
Let's agree on the fact we don't want to separate families.
Well, hold on a second.
We actually want to have a legal immigration system that
Senator,
works.
One at a
we
time.
want to have secure borders.
Senator, one at a time. You said we don't want to separate families.
No.
Okay, because I just heard you on Fox saying, you know, when Trump tries to enforce the law, everybody gets upset. So if you don't want to separate families, then you should be upset by the way that he was enforcing the law. I know it's a different audience now.
But, no, first of all, I don't,
is it okay or is it not okay?
I don't think that's a quote, Chris.
It is. I heard it with my own ears. I watched you.
What I'm talking about is the fact that we have laws and legal precedent and legal loopholes that incentivize people to come to this country illegally. And there's nothing humane on incentivizing young girls from Central America to ride the train they call the Beast, get sexually assaulted, or attract other people that end up dying in the desert. I've seen the pictures of their dead, desiccated bodies. That's not a humane treatment. So what we need is a legal immigration system.
True.
Ours right now is horribly broken. We need to end the incentives for illegal immigration and get control of the system. And I think people of good faith can work together and try and solve the problem. You know, I come from the private sector, Chris.
I know.
Where to succeed in the private sector, you have to tenaciously pursue areas of agreement. What I found in politics, people exploit divisions. I don't like it. I don't like rhetoric. I don't like demagoguery on either side of the political spectrum.
But you have to
I really came here to try and solve problems, stop mortgaging our kids' future.
But you can't solve problems, Senator, if you don't own what the problems are sometimes. You say, I don't want to separate families. But what you don't say is, Trump was wrong to separate the families. He was wrong to do it this way, and it was calculated to be done this way because they didn't even prepare for their own productivity. They didn't put procedures in place. They didn't have accommodations in place. What does that tell us? That tells us that the message, the animus, was more important than the policy. But you don't say that. You don't call that out. Why?
Well, again, I'm trying to positively influence the process, and I'm trying to solve the problem, Chris. So the way you have to do this, you have to recognize the reality. You have to recognize that since 2012, with unaccompanied children and family units, about 900,000 people minimum have flooded our borders, and we don't have the capacity. We haven't prepared for it. Neither the previous administration or this administration has the capacity to deal with this flood. Now, what we also do know is from 2005, when DHS Secretary Michael Chertoff faced a smaller flood from Brazil.
Right.
About 31,000 Brazilians came to this country.
Right.
He instituted a policy, they called it Texas Hold'em. He apprehended these people, processed them, and those that didn't have valid asylum claims, he sent back to Brazil.
He set up the procedures first,
the next year.
He set up the procedures first.
Well,
you know that, right?
Well,
go back and look. Look how much time he put into the procedures.
It was 31,000 under a current system. In 2014 alone, we had 52,000 unaccompanied children.
I know.
The last 2 years, we've had 77,000 family units per year. That's at least 140,000 people. So the scale isn't even close.
I know, but the scale only makes the point more, Senator. If you knew you were going to be dealing with more people and more volume, you would have prepared more in advance if that's what you cared about, the way Chertoff did when he set up his policies and procedures. They didn't do it here. My suggestion is because they wanted the message of harshness, not the practicality of the policy. You said also on Fox, hey, you know, the problem is here, we let them in, they come in, they never show for their hearings.
That's just a statement of fact.
75% do show. They got it up to 90% with programs that you're okay with the Trump administration canceling.
If they're detained. If they're not detained, they don't show up. And the fact of the matter is, of those more than 200,000 unaccompanied children, Chris, 96.5% are still in this country. We haven't deported them, and so we haven't, reduced that incentive for illegal immigration because those children are still in this country. They're using social media, and they're acting as an incentive and a magnet for additional people coming.
75% shows up for hearings are those where it is volitional. If they were detained, you'd get 100%. Because obviously they're detained, so they're going to show up for the hearing. What I'm saying is it's not none of them. It's 75%. That number's too low. I agree. You had programs to get it over 90%. You canceled the programs.
We're looking at different stats on that. So,
well, look, I don't know how people who are in detention don't show up for a hearing. What do you mean? They get lost? Do people give them a break?
No, the ones that are in detention show up. The ones that have been caught and released, they don't show up, and they're still in the interior, and they haven't been deported. And again, that just creates a greater incentive, which is why we've seen a surge of families.
Understood. But look, what I see is this. I see impasse based on completely different theories of America. And it is us versus them. You have a president who is pushing that the people who want to get into this country you should be suspicious of them. Steve King was just on. He echoed it 150%. He actually said the words on the Statue of Liberty were never voted on. They are not a policy of this country. Do you believe that the words of the new Colossus and what's on the foot of the Statue of Liberty, do you believe that that's just some add-on that never has really mattered in terms of what this country is about?
No, I believe we are a nation of immigrants, and every wave of immigrant in the history of this nation have come here seeking the opportunity that America uniquely offers. And they come in, they work incredibly hard, and it needs to be a legal process rather than an illegal process. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. I really don't think we probably have enough legal immigration, but we need to have a legal immigration system that's really focused on
the
economic
president is pushing an
opportunity
agenda
and
of
jobs
cutting
as opposed
legal
to
immigration, and I've never heard you oppose it.
Well, Chris, I'm trying to be as influential as possible in terms of getting the right type of policies. So listen, I tried to work with President Obama in trying to get him to succeed in accomplishing the goals of making this a safe, secure, and prosperous nation. I'm trying to do the same thing with President Trump. I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time. What I try and do is find the areas of agreement and work in a positive way.
Ron, I hear
to accomplish the objectives. That's what I'm trying to. I'm a business guy. I just want to solve problems.
I get you. But who had you on to work the magic board and talk about different economic realities?
No, I appreciate it. That's why I'm back on here.
Who is waiting for you to get a vote on tariffs and see what's going on? Because I know you oppose them. And when that vote is about to happen, I don't think they're going to give you one. But if they do, who will have you on to discuss it? I will. But what I'm saying is, when I hear you talk about the other side here, you say you want to find an accommodation. I hear you say, hey, I haven't seen any meaningful legislation because really they're for open borders. Chuck Schumer offered the president the wall in exchange for DACA. I've never had a Democrat say they want open borders. Why would you describe them that way if you're trying to look for accommodative ways to find solutions?
No, I mean, the catch and release policy, by and large, is a very open border type of policy. It results in people being dispersed all over the country. We've gotten very good, particularly with unaccompanied children, of apprehending, processing, and dispersing. And the fact of the matter is, we've actually dispersed self-admitted MS-13 gang members. And when we round up MS-13 gang members, somewhere between a quarter and a third of those gang members were brought into this country and dispersed as an unaccompanied child.
And that's a problem, and you guys should be able to fix it.
It's a problem.
Everybody should be able to agree on that.
That's why we have to secure our border, and we haven't secured our border. We haven't done it for decades. Administrations of both parties have not secured the border. This administration is trying to do it, but it's battling legal precedent and law that makes it very difficult to do so.
It's more than law. It's about who you want to be and how you want to be, and it's a meaningful debate. Let's see how it goes. You are always welcome here to discuss the arguments that matter to the American people.
I appreciate that. Have a great night.
Senator, I'll see you soon. All right. Don Lemon is standing by. He's got a preview of CNN tonight, just minutes away. Yeah. Don, you're keeping an eye on what could be a big deal for the Democrats, an upset in a New York primary tonight.
10-term incumbent may be upset. It looks like it's heading that way. By a liberal progressive woman. The last time that the incumbent faced a challenge, this woman was a teenager. And so it's going to be a good night for the progressives, we believe. That looks like the way it's going. What does that mean for the midterm elections and so on and so forth? We'll figure that out. But we got a big night of election here. Also, we're going to talk on some of the topics that you're talking about now. Do you know what we were doing 3 years ago, what happened 3 years ago? Today, on this very day, the Supreme Court voted in favor of same-sex marriage. Then you had the President of the United States eulogizing the 9 people who were killed in Charleston. And now today, you have the Supreme Court and the travel ban. And as I always say to you, we have to figure out what kind of country we're going to become after this or in this moment. So just giving you some perspective on where we were and where we are right now and what the hell is going on.
And the big question is, what will be? We'll see. Good show. I'll be watching. Thank you, Don.
See you.
Let's take a break. Hit me on Twitter. Tell me what you liked and what you didn't, what's wrong. I'm going to read some right after the break. Welcome back to Cuomo Primetime. Some of you guys are trying to hurt my feelings, both my ability to feel hot and cold. All right, it's your turn to tell me where I'm wrong. Here's what Peter tweets. Demonstrating to Rep. Steve King that words are important. King is skilled at masking a dangerous ethos, but good to test his message on CNN. I hadn't heard a full interview with King before, kind of hoping not to have to do so. Again, hashtag let's get after it. Peter, remember, you got to be open. Listen to the other side. It hones your own arguments. Silo effect, good for no one. Gina tweeted, I don't like kids being separated from their parents, but illegal entry in the U.S. has to stop. The last administration talked tough, but accomplished nothing. It may have been harsh, but the parents put themselves in that position, come up with a better solution. You are making a strong point, one that must be dealt with in a system that is inefficient at a minimum. However, not all people are coming from the same reason. Remember that. Some are running for their lives. And Adam tweeted, feigning the high road is not reasonable. It's like playing poker with chess pieces. It just won't work. Civility is for another day. When we are dealing with civil people, there is a time to be ideal and there is a time to be real. And now is the time to be real. Hashtag call them out. I think you always have to appeal to what is best in yourself. That's your guide. Thank you for your comments, as always, and thank you for being with us here on Cuomo Primetime. CNN Tonight with Don Lemon starts right now, and I got to tell you, I was sleeping on the primaries, but you have a big one shaping up here in New York.
I'm glad you said that, because when we saw each other a few minutes ago, it hadn't come over yet, but now there is a projected winner in the district here in New York. It is the 11th, New York 11th primary. This young woman, very young, upstart, newcomer, is going to upset a 10-term incumbent. And this is on the Democratic side. Chris, we've been paying so much attention to the Republican side. You know, we were talking about Graham here in New York, and we're talking about Mitt Romney as well. But maybe you think we should be paying more attention to the Democratic side?
100%, because they have to figure out what their message is that will be presented as better for voters than what they're getting from Trump right now. They can't just win on hostility. They're seeing that in real time. Joe Crowley, who they project will lose this primary, he's a 10-termer, right?
Yep.
So that's 20 years. The woman who's about to win,
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
is 28, which means he was in office almost as long as she has been alive. What does that mean for the party? What is being made manifest? We'll see.
The last time he saw a primary again, as I told you in the tease, she was a teenager. But it's interesting because Democrats used to think that in order to win over, at least meaning in recent history, since Trump has won, in order to win over the working class, you know, the folks that they lost during the Obama years, they believe they would have to somehow become a little bit more conservative. But I don't know if that's the right strategy when you consider who's been winning these races when there have been primaries, Democratic primaries.
Over history, you see that out parties have to get back to the fundamentals of the 3 R's. Reach, which is how you get your base out, how you get people out. Okay, reason to believe, what is your message that elevates people, especially important for Democrats, and rationale. Why is it better than now? How do they make that case? Who makes that case? Big questions. They got to check those boxes.
Thank you, sir. I would tell him what your nickname is from your brother, and that's why I'm talking to you about all this stuff, but I'll save that.
Every time you bring him up, you just put a frown on my face, Don. Get back to news, brother. Get back to news.
See you tomorrow. Have a good night, my friend. This is CNN Tonight. I am Don Lemon. As we said, we have some breaking news for you. It's primary night in America. Votes cast in states around the country, including New York, where a major upset is happening right now. Here's what CNN can project, that Congressman Joe Crowley, a member of the Democratic House leadership team who could have been Speaker, has lost to a Democratic socialist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is a race that will have major implications for the Democrats nationally. And we're going to take you to Utah tonight. Polls have just closed in Mitt Romney's run for the Senate. We're going to bring you all the results as we get them, so make sure you stay right here. This is all as the President of the United States is claiming victory as the Supreme Court upholds his travel ban, the third version of a ban that was a signature Trump campaign promise. Third version of it. It restricts people from Iran, North Korea, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Venezuela from entering the United States. Most of those countries are Muslim majority. Well, today's ruling, it's validation for the president who was forced to cave last week on immigration, but has repeatedly called for some version of a travel ban since the early days of his campaign. This ruling is proof positive that elections have consequences. And that brings us back to our breaking election news tonight. We're going to get started there. The breaking news this primary night. CNN's senior political writer and analyst Harry Ensign is here with me, and CNN White House correspondent Caitlin Collins also joins us, and our chief political correspondent Dana Bash is going to join us in just a moment. So thank you all for joining us. Good evening to you. So Harry, this is a big upset here. What's going on?
This is a huge upset. Nobody thought that Joe Crowley was going down. Yes, there was some noise on the left that there was going to be a real challenge. The Intercept really got behind Joe Crowley's progressive challenger. But there was no sense that this was going on. But this is not an isolated incident. In the 9th District in New York, Yvette Clarke is in a lot of trouble tonight. In Maryland, Governor Ben Jealous, who's the left-wing candidate in that race, is doing particularly well. So it does seem, if there was some argument before tonight that there wasn't a lot of energy on the progressive side of the Democratic Party, there certainly was this evening.
So let's talk about her a little bit more, okay, Harry? Because she is running obviously to his left, right?
Correct.
To Crowley's left. It says even with universal health care, a federal jobs guarantee, and the abolition of ICE headlining her demands, Crowley has a formidable liberal record to lean on. So she is young.
She is young.
But?
She is young. She's also a minority candidate in a district that is now majority minority, and she's a woman in the year of the woman. But to me, it's amazing that Joe Crowley really didn't have a firing offense, right? He was a very liberal congressman, but he wasn't liberal enough.
Yeah. What does this say to you about this race? Because when I saw you just before the show, you said this is big. We were paying attention to what happened in Staten Island, especially because of Grimm and Grimm going to jail and all of that. Should we be, same question I asked Chris just moments ago, should we be paying more attention, you think, to Democrat primaries instead of so much focus on the Republicans?
Absolutely. I mean, look, Democrats have a decent shot at taking control in November, but more than just for this year, I think it's a preview of the 2020 primary season, the presidential race, and there could be a lot of energy on the left, and it does seem to me that you just can't be against Trump. You have to stand for something, at least in the primaries tonight.
He ranks 4th among House Democrats, and it was said that he could take over for Nancy Pelosi?
Exactly. He definitely could have, given how much trouble she is. And remember, Eric Cantor lost his primary about 4 years ago tonight. This is that. What that was on the Republican side, this is on the Democratic side. It's huge.
All right. I'm going to get to Caitlin Collins now. Caitlin, it is a big night for the president because in 2 races, in Staten Island and in South Carolina, the candidate that the president threw his weight behind came out ahead.
That's true. And this is really a test of the president's endorsement because so far he's had mixed reviews when he's done that. And we heard a little bit from the president on that last night when he was in South Carolina at that rally for Governor McMaster, trying to get out those last-minute votes. And the White House has really put their full weight behind him. Not only was Trump there, but Vice President Mike Pence had been there over the weekend. So that was really an indication of what really that was to mean for the president. And the president tried to couch it last night by saying that if McMaster did lose, it was going to make the president look bad, and the press was going to say it was a test of his endorsement, which it would have been. So he was telling people to get out and vote in order so that that would not happen. But McMaster is someone who was an early, very loyal supporter of the president. Of course, he became governor when the president picked Nikki Haley to become the United Nations ambassador. So that is how that went. But truly, the president going there, he's already tweeting about his projected victory tonight. The president doesn't tweet this late at night, so clearly he is pleased with the results of that race there. And it does seem to bode well for the president in his mind going forward when he does go and throw his weight behind someone there. You can see there he's saying a tremendous win for Congressman Dan Donovan, someone the president endorsed earlier this year, saying that he had voted for his tax cuts, which he did not. Kind of an embarrassing tweet there, but the president saying he showed great courage in a tough race. Now, this race was interesting, Don, because of course people thought that Dan Donovan's opponent was someone who was more like President Trump than Dan Donovan, so that he was the more Trump-like candidate. What appealed the president's base more often. But there, the president clearly expressing some pleasure. He's very happy with the results of these two races here tonight.
Yeah, that was a pretty fast tweet, Caitlin. But let's bring Dana in now. Dana, what does this mean for the 2018, for this so-called blue wave? Can we read anything in here?
Well, I think obviously at this point in the night, the most stunning election result is what we've seen from Representative Joe Crowley, the fact that he has been defeated from within his own party, a Democratic leader defeated from within his own party from the left. Now, this is something that we have seen for a decade among Republicans. Leaders and others who had been in office for many, many years being much more worried about their right flank than anything else. Obviously, as we've heard from our colleagues, that sentiment and that sensibility has been growing inside the Democratic Party, but nothing is going to shock. And already, I can tell you from talking to sources inside the House Democratic Caucus, it already is sending major shockwaves through their ranks, because this is Joe Crowley is the conference chairman in charge of messaging, and much more importantly, up until an hour ago, he was somebody who was very seriously considering and considered for potentially the Speaker of the House. So that's why this is incredibly symbolic and also a real wake-up call for Democrats tonight, not just in New York, not just in Washington, but frankly, around the country.
So let's talk about, Dana, why you're there. Obviously, we want you on the breaking news, but I see a Romney sign behind you. Tell us what's happening in Utah right now.
Yes. That's right. Meanwhile, in the Republican Party, I am in Utah. You see this picturesque scenery behind me. It is because the Republican nominee in 2012 for president, Mitt Romney, who is now considered as establishment as it gets, he is hoping that he's going to be able to claim victory in his primary here tonight, Don. This is actually something that he didn't expect, nobody in his family or anywhere else expected, but when Orrin Hatch, the longtime serving senator from Utah, announced that he was going to retire, he asked Romney to consider running for a seat, and he is. And this is something that is incredibly significant, because when we're talking about the splits within each party, this is probably as kind of iconic as it gets, because you, of course, remember Mitt Romney went after Donald Trump in the heat and the heart of the Republican primary season, calling him a phony and a fraud. Since, at least certainly when the president was elected, he was considered for Secretary of State, so he's gone back and forth. But the main reason Mitt Romney wants to go back to Washington is because he feels like there needs to be a voice in that wing of the Republican Party. And I think I hear one of Mitt Romney's sons starting to speak behind me, so I'll toss it back to you.
Okay, Dana, stand by. Thank you very much for that. I hate to keep jumping around. I'm going to bring Harry back in now. Harry, let's talk a little bit more about the Democrats, because I'm wondering what this is going to mean for the future of the party come 2020, because people have been lamenting about the lack of leadership in the Democratic Party. And I'm just wondering if this were in New York here, if that is some indication that we're going to be looking at a whole crop, or at least a lot of possibilities, some new folks.
I think we can be looking at a lot of new folks and a lot of younger folks as well. I mean, Joe Crowley was sort of the young person in the Democratic leadership. Nancy Pelosi, who's obviously the leader of the Democrats right now in the House, is getting up there in age. Chuck Schumer is not a young man either. I think that there's a lot of energy, not just on the left side of the party, but among young people. And tonight, obviously, in the 14th, where you have a 28-year-old Latina woman fighting and looking like she has won that race, it indicates to me that there's a lot of balls going on, jumping in the air right now, and I think that it could be a very, very interesting time ahead.
Does this say to you in some instance, and maybe it's just on a micro level, it could be macro, that Democrats, especially the strongest part of the party right now, I would imagine, is the resistance, the progressive part of the party. They really want people to fight back against this administration and its policies.
I think that's definitely the case, although I should say we should point out that there are differences within the resistance, right? There's plenty of the resistance that's not necessarily that far to the left, but this is definitely a sign that the left wing, the progressive wing of the party, is very, very strong, and they want a seat at the table.
All right. Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you, Dana. Thanks, Caitlin. I appreciate it. When we come back, much more in our breaking news tonight. major upset in New York. CNN projects Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a 28-year-old running for her first campaign. She has defeated 10-term incumbent Congressman Joe Crowley in New York's 14th in the most shocking upset of a rollicking political season. Plus, President Trump's travel ban may be watered down. He said so himself, but it's still a win. Here's our breaking news tonight, and there's no other way of putting it. This is the most shocking upset of this political season. CNN projects a progressive political activist has defeated a member of the House Democratic leadership in New York's 14th. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a 28-year-old running her first campaign, beating 10-term incumbent Congressman Joe Crowley. And it's unbelievable. We want to talk about it. Let's bring in now former Congressman David Jolly. He's a Florida Republican. Also, CNN political commentator Scott Jennings and Angela Rye. So here we are on another election/primary night, and wow, there's a lot going on. So, Angela, give me your reaction to this. I mean, Joe Crowley, he was like fourth among House Democrats, losing tonight.
Yeah. He's the chair of the Democratic caucus, and I think one of the things that we're seeing, it really reminds me of that 2010 election, going into the 2010 election when you saw the Tea Party really rise and say that they're taking their country back, and whatever, is behind that, we don't have to debate right now. But I think the interesting thing is people really start battling with the identity of a party. So you're seeing folks saying, you're not liberal enough, you're not progressive enough, or you don't recognize or support or represent my value system anymore. And so we're going to run people who do. And I think you're going to see that a lot more, not just within the Democratic Party ranks between liberals and more liberal or more progressive, but also along racial lines. You're seeing that with the Capuano-Presley race in Boston as well. So I think you're going to see more of this.
Hey, before I bring the other guys in, I just want to ask you this. Do you think that strategy, Angela, it seems to be working in a bunch of local, maybe even some state races, but what about on a national level? You think nationally people are going to say, okay, or at least for Democrats, we want the country to be more progressive and have more liberal values rather than sort of trying to reach out to the people that everyone said Democrats missed last time during 2016?
Sure. Well, I think this is a race that is in a congressional district, but certainly has national implications. You touched on the fact that Joe Crowley is in congressional leadership, so that has national implications. I also would point to two state races right now that I think folks have watched very closely. The Georgia gubernatorial race with Stacey Adams, who ran against Stacey Evans, who now will be up against two very, very conservative folks. Their runoff is coming up, who supported Trump. And then you also have the Florida gubernatorial race, where Andrew Gillum is just pulled ahead, and I think you're going to, again, start seeing more of that. There are historical implications there as well to African-American candidates. Stacey would become the first African-American woman governor in the history of the United States in 2018.
So, David, I want to bring you in. So what do you think of this upset here in New York? What do you think this means for Democrats and for Nancy Pelosi?
Sure. Look, I think both major parties are having hard family conversations right now. And the reality is in the last 2 years, the Republicans' family conversation has been under the spotlight. And it should have been because of Donald Trump's leadership and his tone and how we have seen the division within the Republican Party. But Democrats are facing a hard choice as well, right? Do you take the progressive wing? Do you take the Elizabeth Warren wing? Do you take the Joe Biden, how do we win the flyover states wing? That is a hard formula for Democrats to work through. And the reality is, immediately after the November elections, that's going to be on full display. Look, Donald Trump has disrupted the Republican Party in a historically bad way, and it's one in which the party might not recover. The Democrats don't suffer from the same extremism, if you will, but they do face a challenge of how do you define the party going into the next 2 years. We saw that tonight in Joe Crowley's race.
All right, so let's talk, Scott, let's talk a little bit more about this. What kind of a message, first of all, your overall thoughts, but I also want to know what kind of message this sends to Republicans, this race.
Well, in the case of this New York race where Crowley goes down, this might surprise you to hear me say this, but I'd like to let Angela keep talking, because the more liberal these Democrats get that win these primaries, I mean, if this Crowley race is any foreshadowing for the 2020 Democrat primary for president, Donald Trump's going to win 49 states. There is no possible way to nominate people this far left and expect to compete in a national election. You might compete in a congressional district.
Come
Lord
on.
have
This is
mercy.
ridiculous.
She is way out of touch.
Well, that's
So
that was it.
I'm not
Hang on,
sure.
Angela. Hang on. But that was the reason I asked you the question where I said, does it work on the local or the state level? But how does that play nationally? But go on. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
You know, there are a couple of things here. One is I think that David raised some really good points about the identity of the Democratic Party. And you just brought up Nancy Pelosi. And one of the things that I would say is I think what's happened today and yesterday with Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who many of us call Queen Maxine or Auntie Maxine, who is a celebrated hero, right, of not just Democrats but progressives. How she's been treated by congressional leadership, both in the Senate and the House, is really demonstrative of the type of battle you have going on. You had the DNC chair, Tom Perez, who shortly after was, said they're not going to endorse in any races, endorsed in a gubernatorial primary in New York. So we're running into the same mistakes over and over again. I'm not opposed to having a family conversation on the big screen, Scott. I'm going to tell the party that I've traditionally supported the truth. I don't believe in lying to make people feel better like some of the Trump supporters do.
Okay, so I need to put this up. This is for you, David. Let's put it up on the screen here because I haven't had a chance to see it either. This is the president. He says, wow, big Trump hater, Congressman Joe Crowley, who many expected was going to take Nancy Pelosi's place, just lost his primary election. In other words, he's out. This is a big one that nobody saw happening. Perhaps he should have been nicer and more respectful to his president. So he lost because Donald Trump doesn't feel he was nice enough to him.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. And the Republican candidate on Long Island who endorsed Donald Trump, Michael Grimm, also lost. Somebody who race baits with immigration like this president. And here's what will unite Democrats. And it is the theme of the moment, the story of the moment. This is a president who has defined the Republican Party not through divisiveness, not through fear, but through hatred. Right? This is a party who you can draw a direct line by the president from the Central Park Five to calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, from saying we're not going to allow Muslims in the country and Haitians have AIDS. This is a president who injects hatred and divisiveness into the country. And so as a result of that, Democrats have a much better likelihood of surviving their family conversation than Republicans do, because Democrats can win the suburban moms in Virginia and the suburban communities across the country. Republicans have lost those, which is why Republicans are looking at doom in November.
All right. That's got to be the last word. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, President Trump claiming victory as the Supreme Court upholds his travel ban, the third version of a ban that was a signature Trump campaign promise. Third version of it. Is it vindication for the president who just last week was forced to cave on immigration? President Trump crowing as the Supreme Court hands him a big win today on his travel ban, just 1 week after he was forced to cave on immigration.
Today's Supreme Court ruling just coming out, a tremendous success, a tremendous victory for the American people and for our Constitution. This is a great victory for our Constitution. We have to be tough, and we have to be safe, and we have to be secure.
So I want to bring in now CNN's chief legal analyst, Mr. Jeffrey Toobin, the author of American Heiress, and CNN political commentator Matt Lewis. Good evening, gentlemen. A lot of news to cover tonight. I just want to put this up. This just came out from the New York Times. Scathing editorial, Jeff. And here's the headline. Bigoted and feckless. The travel ban is pure Trump. And then they write this. They say, white racial fear has always been at the core of Mr. Trump's worldview. What's so dangerous about Tuesday's ruling is that the Supreme Court has now implicitly blessed his use of this strategy as a political organizing tool and as a governing philosophy. What's your analysis of this in the ruling?
You know, we're going to be talking about this Supreme Court ruling 25 years from now, 50 years from now. And the real question here is, are we going to let presidents use subterfuge to hide racial bigotry and hide ethnic bigotry? Because I think everybody knows that this was the Muslim ban dressed up in a tutu. I mean,
well, you said subterfuge. I don't know how much of it and how subtle it was. I mean,
well, I mean, as the Supreme Court majority said repeatedly, if you look at the document itself, the travel ban, they never say Muslim. They include Venezuela and North Korea, which are not Muslim countries. But if you look at how this document came about and how this policy came about and the basis for it, it is the Muslim ban.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court said that's okay, even though they even the majority knew how bigoted the impulse was. Sonia Sotomayor for the defense said, let's not kid around. We know why this rule was issued, why this directive became government law.
Yeah.
And they lost, but she only had 4 votes.
And the president himself called it a Muslim ban in the beginning, by the way.
Sure did.
Okay, so Matt, we heard the president. He is vicious tonight on this travel ban. Jonathan Swan over at Axios tweeted that Steve Bannon texted him unprompted following the Supreme Court's decision. There it is up there on the screen. He said, travel ban vindication, big deal for his psyche, reinforces his instincts are right and the haters are wrong. His instincts are right and the haters are wrong. Does this reinforce the president's instincts, Matt?
No, I don't think it does. Look, this is something they tried to do in January when Steve Bannon was there. The rollout was a debacle. It took them 3. This is like passing the bar on your third time, your third test. Like, are you going to really celebrate it that much? Maybe go out and have a beer. It's not a huge victory. The third time, it took them 1.5 years to do it. I would say, I think that the bigger victory is for the Supreme Court, who I think actually got this right. I was actually happy to see their job is not to divine what Donald Trump's original motives were, nor is their job to decide whether or not this is a good policy. Their job is to interpret the Constitution, and the president has wide latitude on this. And if you look at the actual order, the actual travel ban, which as you noted earlier, includes North Korea and Venezuela,
that wasn't in the original.
The president has the statutory authority to do it. They made the right call, and I'm happy to see that.
I think I disagree with every word you said, Matt, including the ands and the thes and everything else. I think it is a huge victory for Donald Trump, and I think he's going to take it that way. And he's going to keep pushing immigration. He's going to keep pushing on the Mexican border. This is the issue that made him president of the United States. I think he believes that, and he is going to continue to use it in the most divisive way possible. I think, unlike Matt, it is a shameful moment for the Supreme Court because they are the last word on what kind of country we are, and it's an embarrassment.
Well, this is a big issue, and this is why
their job is to interpret the Constitution and what the order is. Not to try. Look, I agree. I think that Donald Trump's original motives, the first time he issued this order, which, by the way, has changed. I mean, originally, there were U.S. citizens who couldn't come in the country, people who had visas who couldn't get back into the country. It has changed. Their job is to look at the travel ban as it currently exists. And it doesn't target people based on religion. It targets people, it excludes people based on what country they come from. You and I may not think that's a good policy, but it's certainly a legitimate thing for a president to do.
This is like the argument that, well, it doesn't ban every Muslim majority country, like it doesn't ban Indonesia, it doesn't ban Pakistan. That's like saying, well, if you rob some banks, well, you didn't rob all the banks, so you're innocent.
But you could be a Muslim person coming in from London or Paris or many other countries. It doesn't bother you at all. This has to do with like North Korea, Yemen, countries that I think we would agree actually are unstable and probably aren't doing a great job of vetting immigrants as they come in.
I got to get this in because I want to ask you, because your book, The Nine, right, you wrote about this. What does this say about Justice Kennedy? Because should we read the tea leaves on anything? Is he going to announce something that he's going to be retiring?
Well, tomorrow's a big day. You know, it is not required for Supreme Court justices to announce their retirement on the last day of the term, but tomorrow is the last day of the term. That's customary. Anthony Kennedy is 81. He's a Republican. He might want to turn his seat over to a Republican president, but the concurring opinion he issued was pretty hostile to the way Donald Trump has conducted himself. He talked about how, even if it's not unconstitutional, public officials should be careful of how they express themselves. It had a good deal of contempt for the president in what he wrote.
The president should be held in check as well.
Right, although, his vote was the one that gave Trump the victory. I thought it suggested, and I don't want to pretend that I know what's going to happen tomorrow about a retirement, I thought it suggested that Kennedy was going to hang around for at least another year.
Jeffrey, Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate it. When we come back, important development in the Rush investigation to tell you about. We're going to tell you what a judge is saying about criminal charges against the former Trump campaign chairman, talking about Paul Manafort, plus the Russian pop star at the center of that infamous Trump Tower meeting, releasing a music video that sure seems to be trolling the president. You got to see this.
Not knowing where you sleep tonight.
Major development to tell you about in the Rush investigation today, and it is a big legal setback, a big one for Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman. Let's discuss now. CNN political correspondent Sarah Murray joins us. Sarah, good evening to you. A federal judge has denied a request by Paul Manafort to dismiss criminal charges against him in Virginia. Tell us more about the ruling.
Well, that's right. Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, was basically arguing that the special counsel didn't have the authority to bring these charges against him in Virginia. And what was interesting about this case is this judge actually looked like sort of the most sympathetic figure to Paul Manafort's plight in recent months. You know, he actually said a couple months ago that it appeared that prosecutors were essentially just using Paul Manafort to try to get to Donald Trump. And these comments stuck out as, frankly, the one kind of ray of hope for Paul Manafort, but they stuck out so much that even the president himself latched onto them, pointed them out, used it to insist that that Mueller's investigation was in fact a witch hunt. But today, Paul Manafort got another blow as the judge decided that this trial could move forward. It now means that Manafort is preparing for trials in D.C. as well as in Virginia. Prosecutors have brought roughly 25 criminal charges against him, and if he's convicted, he would face more than 300 years in prison. He is still pleading not guilty, insisting he is going to fight his way to trial. Done.
Wow. Okay. More news in the Rush investigation. Now, there is a new music video, Sarah, released by a Russian pop star with a notorious connection to the Trump family and the Rush investigation. So tell us about the video and the man behind it.
Well, Don, the Russia investigation has brought together an interesting cast of characters and now a music video, if you can believe that. This is the Russian pop star who helped to facilitate this now infamous meeting at Trump Tower during the presidential campaign. And it's hard to describe this video as anything other than trolling President Trump.
The Russian pop star who helped facilitate the 2016 meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and the Russians at Trump Tower, taking a cheeky jab at President Trump.
I wish you at least could be honest. I wish that you told me the truth.
Emin Agalarov's new music video, titled Got Me Good, features a risque roundup of encounters with Trump family lookalikes. From Agalarov and a Trump impersonator partying in a hotel room with bikini-clad women, to a fake Ivanka Trump accepting a mysterious briefcase from Agalarov.
You really got me so blue.
Agalarov, the son of a billionaire Russian real estate developer, came under scrutiny for encouraging his publicist, Rob Goldstone, to contact Trump Jr. about a meeting with a Russian lawyer offering up dirt on Hillary Clinton. "If it's what you say, I love it," Trump Jr. replied. It culminated in a June 2016 meeting, including top Trump officials like Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. 1 year later, after the meeting came to light, it sparked a deeper dive into Trump's years-long relationship with the Agalarovs. Back in 2013, the real Trump partied with the Agalarovs when they helped Trump bring the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow. The music video nods to the salacious but unproven claims about Trump's activities on the trip, documented in the dossier that has dogged the president. The images of a Trump impersonator alongside the scantily dressed women in the hotel room, particularly suggestive after Trump's longtime bodyguard, Keith Schiller, testified to lawmakers that he rejected an offer from Agalarov's circle to send women to Trump's Moscow hotel room during the trip. At the time, Trump declared the Russia trip a success, tweeting at the elder Agalarov, "I had a great weekend with you and your family. You have done a fantastic job. Trump Tower Moscow is next." Emin was wow. The project never came to fruition, but has emerged as another area of interest in the Mueller probe. Crammed with racy references, the 3-minute music video features faux appearances from Hillary Clinton, porn star Stormy Daniels, and Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. As a shadowy figure reviews Trump's encounters, apparently all under surveillance, he edits Trump out of the footage. All of this under the watchful eye of none other than a lookalike of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Now, Don, I'm not sure that is going to be the pop hit of the summer, but it does give you just the latest indication of how President Trump cannot escape the investigation that he calls a witch hunt, even when it comes to music videos.
That was some good trolling, Sarah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's bring in now senior counterterrorism analyst Philip Mudd, who worked for both the FBI and the CIA, and Michael Isikoff, the chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News, who is co-author of Russian Roulette, the inside story of Putin's war on America and the election of Donald Trump. You have to laugh. Good evening to you guys.
Are we
Michael,
done with this yet?
You call this a very bizarre music video, right? But what's the significance beyond just how strange it is and trolling it is?
Well, it certainly is bizarre. I mean, the real question is, what is the message that Emin Agalarov is trying to communicate here? Because, I mean, some of those lines, I wish you could be honest, I wish you had told me the truth, suggests that the Agalarovs, who are so key to the whole Russia story, believe that Trump may have in some way betrayed them or promised something that he didn't deliver. That's certainly one interpretation. Another interpretation here is that Emin Agalarov is just shrewdly trying to exploit the Russia scandal for his own personal profit, to get attention for this video, to get attention for this music career. And I think that's probably the one we should rely on for the moment, absent further evidence.
I'm sure you heard the sound effects. I think you hit right on it. Yeah. That was me with the bell. Ding, you win. So, I mean, let's put up some of the video and show a little bit more of this, because it shows him hanging out with these shadily meeting with impersonators of Trump, Ivanka, Stormy, Hillary Clinton, while handing over mysterious briefcases and then envelopes. I mean, you just heard he is no stranger to the Trump family. Why do you think he is mocking the president? You think it's just he's exploiting it for his own gain? Or do you think there's some other message behind it?
There is no message here. I get to do pop culture on CNN. This is the highlight of my career on the network. Let's cut to the chase about what this is, because it's not very complicated. This is Kim Kardashian meets the Kremlin. This guy's saying, how do I make a career in pop culture? Let me see how many hits I can get, not only on YouTube or Instagram or whatever the heck it is, Facebook, MySpace, I don't know what this is on. This is about somebody saying, I want to get hits so I can increase my notoriety. If we're trying to overinterpret this to say there's some deep, dark political message beyond mimicking the P-tapes that are so famous, I don't think it's true. I think this guy's just trying to make a name, and my pop culture interpretation is this is not very deep. That's it.
Okay. Let's take a break on that one. We'll bring these guys back right after this. More to discuss. Okay. An FBI agent who sent disparaging texts about President Trump to a colleague set to answer questions behind closed doors from Congress tomorrow. Back with me now, Philip Mudd and Michael Isikoff. So, Michael, Peter Strzok, that's who we're talking about, due on Capitol Hill tomorrow. He's that agent, the FBI agent, who exchanged text messages with Lisa Page about stopping Donald Trump from becoming president. The interview is scheduled to be conducted behind closed doors, but I mean, given the political firestorm that is raging all around him and this, do you expect that we're going to hear about what he says?
Sure, and I think inevitably he's going to have to testify in public. Now, interestingly, on Thursday, Christopher Wray, the FBI director, and Rod Rosenstein are going to be testifying in public before the same committee, the House Judiciary Committee. And that's going to be a really interesting session, because you know where the House Republicans are coming from on this. They are, they've convinced themselves that the entire Mueller investigation is, fruit from a poison tree that originated by biased FBI agents, Peter Strzok being their being the prime example. And Rod Rosenstein has been trying to walk a very fine line here. He's the guy overseeing Mueller's investigation. He's the guy in charge of it. The House Republicans are going to be coming after him to defend the Mueller investigation. It's going to be really interesting to see how he handles that, how he responds to what's going to be hostile questions at that hearing on Thursday.
Phil, listen, you have a unique perspective here because you have worked with the FBI. So what kind of information can Strzok provide? What What could he possibly share?
He can offer some context here. Look, you're dealing with an investigation that involves hundreds of people. He made an epically stupid mistake using a government issued phone
to have an affair,
to talk about not only an affair, but to talk about a political candidate in an investigation he was involved with. His mistake was not saying negative things about Donald Trump. Everybody involved, every American voter was saying negative things about either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. His mistake was using a government-issued phone to do this. I tell you, I learned one lesson about what he's going to go do on the Hill. That was a lesson I learned in the CIA. When you're involved in a situation like this, go dumb early. He's going to have to walk in and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. There was no excuse. I was never involved in doing anything to manipulate the investigation. I was trying to impress my girlfriend, something every guy in America does every day.
Okay, Mr. Strzok, but you said when she asked, oh, there's no way, or is he going to become president, and you say, no, we'll stop him. What do you mean by that?
What I interpret that to mean is I've got a chick I'm trying to work on. She's my new girlfriend. I'm trying to say I'm the tough guy. Let's play this out seriously for a moment. I don't think the American people understand how many people would have been involved in this investigation. Hundreds. So what are they supposed to do? Walk in the room and say, hey, we got a conspiracy I want you to participate in. Among all of us, not just me and Lisa Page, among all of us, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and the other 200 people involved in the investigation, I'm going to persuade you to have a massive conspiracy that nobody else is going to reveal to undermine the president. That's not credible. He made a mistake, an epic mistake. I don't think he undermined the investigation.
Chicks, man, huh?
Yeah, they'll get you in trouble.
Just I haven't heard that term in a long time. So, Michael, let's talk about Eric Prince now. Given total access to his phone, his computer, his special counsel, we know that Mueller is also going to be looking into that meeting that Prince held, supposedly a secret meeting in the Seychelles. What is Mueller looking to find out?
Well, look, Mueller is coming to a crucial point in his investigation. I think there's a sense that he's got a couple of months here. If he's got something big to deliver it, because come Labor Day, I think anything he does after that would be perceived as trying to do something on the on the eve of an election. Given all the criticism of what Jim Comey did, Mueller's not going to fall into that trap. So, we're at a crucial point. Now, the Eric Prince story, it seems in one sense a bit tangential to the core issues. To what extent it took place after the election, to what extent was that part of some sort of conspiracy involving the Russians and the Trump campaign? There's still a lot of murkiness to this, and certainly Prince's answers that he's given so far have been inconsistent with some of the testimony that Mueller's gotten from others about what he knew about who he was meeting with, that he was going to be meeting with a Russian there. I think we just have to sort of, hold off till we see the full story before we reach any conclusions about it. But I do think we're coming to a critical moment for Mueller.
But his testimony, I mean, there is some scrutiny there because he said that it was a chance meeting, and then, the Washington Post is saying, well, maybe not so much. This was a planned meeting, right? They're saying that it was planned, and it could have been to establish this back channel between the Kremlin and the Trump administration. So he's in a lot of trouble if that is indeed so, and even because his testimony is under scrutiny.
It is, but let's make sure we keep our eye on the ball here. Whether or not somebody had weird meetings in the Seychelles is not really the critical issue here. That might be stupid. It's not illegal. There's one basic question here, and Michael, I hesitate to support a journalist who's dead on. The real issue here is whether something happened in the Seychelles that involved Eric Prince arranging a meeting where somebody offered something of value to the Trump campaign. For example, we will put stuff up in Pennsylvania that's negative about Hillary Clinton. I think Michael is dead on about one other final issue. If Mueller doesn't lay out something by early September, he's not going to want to do something, more indictments, for example, in October, November, that interfere with the elections. If we don't see something by early September, we're not going to see something till December. I don't think that's likely. We're going to see something within 60 days.
Yeah, someone really smart sat there recently, said they believe it's going to be, I'm just saying it, by Labor Day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's too late after that, and he's going to have to wait until after the election.
I think that's right.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
When we come back, a primary shocker in New York tonight. A 10-term Democratic leader defeated by a newcomer. It is a race with national implications. We're going to have more in just a moment. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. 11 p.m. here on the East Coast. We're live with the breaking news for you. This is primary night in America, and we've got all of the information for you. CNN can now project that Congressman Joe Crowley, a 10-term member of the Democratic House leadership team, who could have been Speaker, by the way, has lost to a Democratic Socialist newcomer. Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is a race that will have major implications for the Democrats nationally. And then we're going to take you to Utah tonight as well, where CNN projects Mitt Romney has won the GOP Senate primary. Much, much more on all of that to come. Plus this, the Supreme Court handing President Trump a victory today on his travel ban. The ruling, well, it's proof positive that elections have consequences. Consequences that include changing the direction of the Supreme Court for years to come. I want you to just look at where we were. This is exactly 3 years ago today. That is the White House, lit up in rainbow colors in celebration of the Supreme Court ruling that established the right of gay people to get married. On that same day, the extraordinary moment when the President of the United States sang Amazing Grace, leading the nation in mourning 9 African Americans murdered in the Charleston church shooting.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
And 3 years later, President Trump is reshaping this country and dismantling some of President Obama's signature accomplishments. More on that in a moment as well. But I want to get right now to tonight's primary results. That is our breaking news. I want to bring in now CNN's chief political correspondent, Dana Bash in Utah, and CNN's politics senior writer and analyst, Harry Inton. Good evening to both of you. Harry and Dana, welcome back to this program, the second hour. So Dana, Romney won the Republican primary out in Utah. Did he run as a friend or a foe of the president?
Yes. He ran and he won on both being a friend and a foe of President Trump. And look, this is really an important point here because I'm actually just want to let you know that I'm hearing myself and you're probably hearing yourself very loudly coming back from the screen, which is a good thing because they're playing this CNN here at Romney headquarters. But you remember back in 2016, the then former presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, made a very, very scathing speech against and about Donald Trump, calling him a fake and a phony, really became the poster child of the Never Trump movement. Then about 8 months later, he was already being considered for Secretary of State and was actively talking to Donald Trump about potentially being in that position. And so when we talked before this primary, I asked him which one of those will go to Washington.
When you go to the Senate, which Mitt Romney is going to go? The one that called Donald Trump a fake and a phony, or the one who talked to him about being Secretary of State?
I believe I've made it pretty clear that I'll stand with President Trump if the policies he's proposing are good for the state of Utah, for other states, for the nation. On the other hand, if he were to say something that is divisive and significant, something which were racist or anti-woman or anti-immigrant, then I feel a moral responsibility to speak out. So I'll speak my mind. Significant, something which were racist.
Speaking his mind is what a lot of Republican primary voters said that they want him to do. That is why they want him to go to Washington, to be a counterweight for Donald Trump. But this is still a very red state. There are a significant number of Trump supporters here who went out and voted in today's primary. And there have been saying to Mitt Romney, I certainly heard it, you know what? Please toe the line. This is a president that we all support. And that is why you definitely hear both sides of that from Romney saying, I'm going to support him when I can, and I'm going to oppose him when I see that that is important to do. This is just the primary, but this is also, as I mentioned, a very red state. So it is hard to imagine Mitt Romney, a Republican, not going on to win the general election in November.
Dana, you are good. I don't know if people realize how tough it is to keep your concentration when you hear yourself talking. So I'm going to bring Harry in.
Very loudly.
Very loudly, I know. So Harry, let's talk about New York now. New York's 14th, right? A huge political upset. We're talking about Representative Joe Crowley. He's going to lose to this progressive activist, this upstart, right? Upstart activist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What does that mean? What does that tell us?
Well, I mean, she's a 28-year-old Latina woman running first time for political office and running to Joe Crowley's left. I think it says a number of things. I think it says that the progressive part of the Democratic Party is alive and well in New York City. And you combine that with Ben Jealous winning the Democratic nomination for governor in Maryland. It's a good night for progressives nationally. It also tells us that this is the year of the woman, right? She's a woman running against an older white male. And also, it's about the district itself, right? This is a district that has become a lot more diverse over the last 20 years since Crowley first won his election, and she was a Latina woman.
Yeah. What about other key races? What do you know?
Well, again, if you look across the Democratic side, we saw progressives doing very, very well. We saw that in the 9th District in New York. We saw that in the Maryland gubernatorial race, the Democratic side. But also on the Republican side, more generally speaking, in New York, Michael Grimm, federal tax evasion charges. He went down to defeat tonight Dan Donovan, who was endorsed by President Trump, even though he had voted against Trump's tax plan. Donovan wins. Trump endorsed him. Good night for the president on that front.
All right, Harry, thank you very much. Thank you, Dana. I appreciate it. We're going to bring Dana back in just a little bit. So now I want to bring in our CNN contributor Frank Bruni of the New York Times and CNN political analyst April Ryan. Ryan Lizza of Esquire magazine. I'm meshing my names here. It happens a lot.
April and I are always confused for one another.
Twinsies. And CNN political commentator and Republican strategist Alice Stewart, whose name I never mess up. Alice, thank you very much for joining us. All of you, thank you for joining us. So, Frank, I'm going to start. This is what the president tweeted tonight, and let me read it right off the screen here. It says, "Wow. Big Trump hater Congressman Joe Crowley, who many expected was going to take Nancy Pelosi's place, just lost his primary election. In other words, he's out. That is a big one that nobody saw happening. Perhaps he should have been nicer and more respectful to the president." He lost a Democratic primary to a Democratic socialist because he wasn't nice to the president.
The president's ability to make everything about himself is just boundless. One can have many different opinions about what this election and what Crowley's defeat means, but one thing for sure that it doesn't mean is that he wasn't nice enough to Donald Trump, and the voters in that district rebelled against that. I can guarantee you of that, Don Lemon.
Yeah, maybe if he was running against a Republican.
None of us paid a lot of attention to that race, and that's interesting. We should go back and think about that. But she was not campaigning as someone who was going to be kinder to Trump than Representative Crowley was. I can guarantee you of that as well.
She was campaigning on Obamacare and immigration, and the opposite of what the president is doing.
She was
very progressive values.
She was campaigning on a very, very progressive ticket or agenda, and it is, as Harry said, it's a big night tonight for progressives because they haven't had a lot of these victories in the primaries so far.
Yeah.
And what happened in this district sort of stands out as an exception to that.
Ryan Lizza, what's your read on tonight? Looking forward to November.
This race, I think, is absolutely fascinating. Maybe the biggest upset in primary politics since David Bratt beat Eric Cantor. Remember that race?
Yeah.
Eric Cantor was on his way to being perhaps Speaker of the House and was defeated by this very right-wing Republican, David Bratt. And this looks a lot like that. I think any Democrat running in a primary this year is going to look at this and say, wait a second, don't take your district for granted, especially if you're in a very progressive district like Crowley was. And don't do what Crowley did, which was he didn't show up to a debate. He sent a surrogate instead. And Don, you said she ran on Obamacare. She didn't run just on Obamacare. She ran to the left of Obamacare on Medicare for all. She ran on very strict gun control. She ran on abolishing ICE. I mean, she ran on every kind of blue sky progressive issue out there, and she beat what is Crowley, I believe is the number, 4 or 5 person in the Democratic leadership, someone who was talked about as a potential Speaker of the House. This is going to send shockwaves through the Democratic Party.
Interesting. So, Alice, give us a roadmap here for Republicans to fight off what Democrats hope. They're hoping it's going to be a blue wave. We still got some time to go, but give us a roadmap.
Well, the red wave is certainly not panning out quite the way that a lot of Democrats thought it was going to be, or the blue wave is not panning out quite as well as Democrats thought it was going to be, because Republicans are doing well. And here's the key. Like Frank and Ryan said, that race in New York was nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was all about Democratic Party becoming more progressive and more women. big picture-wise, with regard to Republicans, I think clearly Mitt Romney is a shoo-in in Utah. Clearly, he won in 2012, 72% of the vote, and he's shoe-in for the general. McMaster in South Carolina is a good sign for the president. The president supported him, has always supported him. And we're seeing all across the country, more than anything for Republicans, this is a time where Republican candidates need to show that they are beholden to their constituents, will stand up for the conservative values. And in McMaster's case, he is hook, line, and sinker for Donald Trump on policy and tone and rhetoric. Whereas you have out in Utah, you have Mitt Romney who says, look, I'm with the president on policy, domestic policy that is, but the tone and rhetoric I'm not for, and I will not be a rubber stamp, but I will be a check and balance. What we're going to see more and more, especially with these congressional races and some Senate races, these are more about what do the constituents want? Do they want another Donald Trump, or do they want someone that will go there and hold his feet to the fire? And I think we need to take these as a race-by-race basis and not do a big picture, because each of them are individual.
Not read so much into it. So, Dana, I know that you're there in Utah, and Alice mentioned Utah, and she talked about Romney's strategy and how he ran. So what are your thoughts about this big upset tonight?
Look, this is really, it is an eye-opener for Democrats. We've been talking about that, since you started your program. But I don't really think it is fully sunk in for a lot of these Democrats in leadership and across the country how seismic of a moment this is for somebody as high in leadership as Joe Crowley is, as somebody who was clearly reaching for the top job as potentially to be House Speaker if Democrats took over, to be toppled like this. It really is reminiscent of what we saw in 2010 when the Tea Party came in, and what we saw with really a slow awakening of these establishment Republicans. We're going to start to see among establishment Democrats. There are so many factors that went into Joe Crowley's surprise defeat. In some ways, it was a perfect storm of the fact that his opponent is a woman and is everything that Joe Crowley is not in terms of gender and ethnicity, but also in terms of just being other and different. And that is a very, very important thing for Democrats to remember. And it's just a seismic, as I said, a seismic event for their party that Republicans are just starting to deal with as the new normal in their party. Democrats are going to start to do as well. And I would just say I've talked to several Democrats over the past hour or so who really do say that they were floored, and that Joe Crowley did something that, it tends to be a fatal mistake, which is he says he took it seriously, but perhaps he didn't talk up his own abilities and his own record as much as he should have, because she defined herself, and that's kind of 101 in politics.
So, listen, I want to get to another subject, but I just have to ask you, Harry, when listening to Dana there, she's talking about Democrats. And what I hear from progressives, especially younger folks, there aren't enough young people in Washington. There aren't enough young people in politics. Our representatives are so old. They don't represent us. They don't understand the browning of the country. And if Democrats will just stick to that, maybe in the short term, they won't take that. But in the long term, everything is on their side. Is that correct?
I certainly would agree with the idea that the Democratic leadership. Schumer was born in, 1950? Nancy Pelosi was born before that. The Democratic Party has changed since those people came into power, and so it's not just about ideology, it's also about representation, about who the Democratic base is, and it's becoming a much more diverse Democratic base, and tonight's challenge that was successful against Joe Crowley is a #1 sign of that.
And I think that the lesson from that is learning from what Bernie Sanders did with young people, right? Bernie Sanders isn't young, but he had a very young coalition. Who was that trying to get in? Was that Ryan?
It was me, Don.
Oh, Alice, sorry.
Yeah, one thing I was going to say, this is a classic case of these incumbent members, elected officials. You cannot phone it in. You have to go out there and still work your constituents. You can't skip debates and treat your constituents like they have said, what are we, chopped liver? You have to go out there and continue to press the flesh, push your message, and connect with these people. And Cortez did that.
Okay,
she worked
but
really
I
hard,
agree.
and Crowley took it for granted.
I understand what you're saying, but I also think in a district, especially like the district she ran in the 14th, is a very diverse district. The country country is becoming more diverse, and I just think that people want people who represent them or who look like them, and I guess sort of portray their values. And I'm just looking, into the future about Democrats and whether they're on the right side of history when it comes here, because that's all I hear. They're not young enough, they're not progressive enough, they keep trying to be like Republican light, and they're just out of touch. So let's talk about that a little bit more. And then late night hosts hitting the president back. Wait till you see it right after this break.